Good morning. If I could have everybody take their seats, we're about ready to begin. Thank you very much for coming to the 25th anniversary Housing Real Estate Forecast, brought to you by the Edmonton Multiple Listing Service. My name is Grant Ainsley. I'll be your MC for the morning. I'm really pleased and proud to be asked to be your Master of Ceremonies. I've known and worked with the Realtors Association of Edmonton for about the past 10 or 15 years, and it's a great organization, some great leadership, and I'm really happy to be here today, and I'm very proud that they've asked me to be your MC. The day's going to move along really quickly. We have a lot of great speakers for you, full slate of speakers, people who have a real view of the future of this industry in this province and this city, and they know about what's going on. They have some great insight, and they'll put it to you in a really unique and interesting way. They assure me that it's going to be a fast-paced, good-moving today. It's tough these days sometimes to be a realtor. I know we have hundreds in the crowd today here at the Expo Center. I was talking with a realtor this morning just after breakfast, John, and he's been in the business for a number of years, and he had a bad experience just before Christmas that he wanted to pass along. John, like he always does, he sent a floral bouquet to a young couple that he sold a home to. They moved in just before Christmas. John got a call on that Saturday. They moved in, I think it was December 15th, and the customer said, "John, this is great, the flowers are wonderful, but the card says, rest in peace." And John says, "Oh my God, must be some mix-up. I've dealt with this florist for years, and they haven't had a problem, but look, I'll call the florist, I'll find out what's going on." John calls the florist, and the florist says, "Yeah, sorry, there was a mix-up. Your bouquet went somewhere else. Sorry about that, John, but look, it could have been a lot worse." And John says, "How could it be worse? I have customers that I just sold a home to. They've got a bouquet, and it says, rest in peace." And the florist says, "Yeah, but John, some dead guy at a funeral home got a card that said, congratulations on your new home." We have a terrific day coming up today. As I mentioned, the Honorable Alison Redford is going to be our keynote speaker, and she'll be here a little bit later on to talk about some of the legislative changes that affect the housing industry. With $7 billion plus in real estate sold in this city last year, the Premier knows that this is a very important audience, and you are very important people to speak to today. So it's going to be interesting to have the Premier here today. Little bit of a late entry. We have Danielle Smith also here as well. She has a booth at the back during the break. She'll be selling Keno tickets to make money for the arena. You got to raise that money for that arena somehow, right? You really got to. I saw a tweet the other day. Somebody, I think, had a great idea. He says, forget about selling Keno tickets. Just put a swear jar for motorists along 114th Street by the university area as the LRTs keep going by. Swear jar would raise a lot of money. We also have the chief economist for the city of Edmonton, John Rose, returning for a third time. And we have Angus Watt of Global TV and 630 CHED radio fame making a return to the podium here. The Edmonton Economic Development Corporation is going to be represented by its new president and CEO, Brad Ferguson, is here. Brad started his job last August, so it'll be interesting to hear what the new guy has to say. And also new this year is David Land, the new economist for our area from CMHC. And so we look forward to what David has to say a little bit later on in the program. And finally, we'll hear from our new president, our brand new president, Daryl Cook. Daryl's a wonderful guy. Got to have a chance to have lunch with Daryl just before Christmas. Daryl and John Hull from the Realtors Association. I know you're going to love Daryl as a president. He's been a realtor for about 18 years. And it was interesting, a couple of years ago, he set up his own brokerage, and he was telling me the story over lunch that he had a good location, good traffic area, lots of people driving by. He was thinking about the sign he was going to put out front, when all of a sudden, right next door to him on this side, another brokerage set up shop, and they put up a big sign that said, "Best Agents." So Daryl was a little concerned about this, still thinking what he's going to put on his sign, when lo and behold, another real estate brokerage opens up on the other side and puts up a big sign that says, "Lowest Commissions." Daryl's thinking to himself, man, I'm screwed. Best agents, lowest commissions. Then he got smart. Put up the biggest sign of all three right above his front door that said, "Main Entrance." Anyways, I know you're going to enjoy Daryl. He's a young guy with lots of good ideas, lots of energy, and he's been involved for a long time. So on behalf of the Realtors Association, we certainly want to thank our speakers here. Let's give them a round of applause to thank them. Before they get up, let them know that They've taken a lot of time to put these presentations together. We certainly couldn't offer this without the financial and logistical support of our sponsors. The Service Credit Union is at the back of the room there. Service is our primary sponsor for this event. They have a number of representatives here at the breakfast. Would everybody from Service stand up and wave for us, please? Service Credit Union? Right at the back of the room there by the Service, thank you very much. Be sure to stop by the display at the entrance to enter in their draw right next to the Keno stand there. Joining them as a primary sponsor again is the Edmonton Journal. We certainly welcome the representatives to us today. I hope you picked up a complimentary copy of the Journal coming in, and the Journal staff will be recognized a little bit later on in the program. The Edmonton Economic Development Corporation and Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation sponsored our breakfast this morning. Will EEDC and CMHC representatives please stand to be recognized? EEDC and CMHC, where are you? Great, thanks for the breakfast. The coffee break later on is going to be sponsored by our very own Real Estate Weekly. You likely have seen Dave Robb taking some photos. He's going to be popping up, and he'll also be at the display at the back for Real Estate Weekly. And we again welcome the Edmonton Realtors Community Foundation, which is promoting their special events by the entrance and holding a draw for some exciting prizes at the back. Representatives of Rebar Camp are going to have a display. This is what they call a non-conference, and it's going to be held in February just for realtors. So it's going to be a video at the coffee break that they're going to be showing you, and they're going to be explaining this concept for you. Realtors, I find it's funny working with them because there's so many realtors, obviously, hundreds, I guess thousands in the city, and they have to set themselves apart, and so they have to really differentiate themselves by saying they are the best realtor, the best agent, whatever it might be. So this is the situation of two realtors meeting one another. Hi, my name's John, I'm a realtor. I'm better than you are. Realtor's joke, sorry. Okay, we'll just move right along. Oh, it's marketing help that you need. The Morris Real Estate Marketing Group is here. Say hi to Phil Hollander. Phil is going to be around, and you can talk to him at the back for the Morris Real Estate Marketing Group, and he can help you with their training and promotional needs. So visit the displays. These are companies that have helped support this industry, and certainly we hope that we can help them. I offer a special welcome to all the realtors who are here today, of course, and their guests. And we have some special guests here today as well. Members of the Greater Edmonton Growth Team, planners and economists from the City of Edmonton, municipal officials from communities throughout the Edmonton area. Just talked to Councillor Ed Gibbons, and I know that Councillor Soheed is here as well. From Calgary, we welcome the President-elect and Executive Vice President of the Calgary Real Estate Board, and also representatives of the Alberta and also the Canadian Real Estate Association are here today. Thank you very much for coming. Once again, we offer access to social media. We will be doing some live streaming of the entire forecast event on the internet, and you can review the presentations on the website and linked at ereb.com. So we have that up there as well. Don't forget, you can tweet throughout the presentation. The Twitter hashtag is RAEForecast, and we have that up on the screens. And finally, in an effort to reduce our carbon footprint, we've not printed copies of the handouts for everyone. We've printed some out, but certainly you can download the presentations to your smartphones, your iPads, and tablets directly from ereb.com. There's Wi-Fi available. In some places it's not working, so I'm not a Wi-Fi tech, so if it's not working, don't ask me. But certainly we do have an opportunity for you. There's 10 cards there that show where you can download the presentation, what the passwords are. They're at each table. And I think if you download the PDF, you need to put capital letters in the H and the S to get it to download. As usual, this event was heavily subscribed before Christmas. We have about 700 realtors and their guests here today. There's going to be 6 presentations today. The speakers will be around after their presentations. We won't be taking questions from the floor because there's just too many people here today, but they will be taking questions after their presentations, and they'll be around the tables and that sort of thing. So if you have any questions, they'd be happy to answer them, especially the easy ones. Please try to keep movement in and out of the room to a minimum so everybody can enjoy the morning. And please take a moment at this time to switch off your cell phones, at least turn them into vibrate or to silent mode. We have a new rule this year that anybody who has a cell phone that rings during a presentation, would the person next to you collect $20 from that person and just bring it up to the front? So if it's like a big customer, you're waiting for a call back, it's a cost of doing business, just pay the $20 and it'll be great. We'll put the money towards the Realtors Foundation. Let's move on to the program. To bring us to the economic picture for Edmonton for this year ahead, we're delighted to introduce John Rose. John has over 25 years of experience in economic analysis, modeling, and consulting in the private and public sector. Most recently, he worked for the Director of Economics for PricewaterhouseCoopers in Toronto. He joined the City of Edmonton in May 2010 as the City of Edmonton's Chief Economist. John is also a third-generation cottager. He spends his summers with a hammer in one hand and a paintbrush in the other. He loves jazz music. Quite often you'll find him at the Yardbird Suite in Old Strathcona. And he also is a real reader of nonfiction, I understand. Trying to look at the economy over the past few years, that's an interesting thing to do. John's presented at the Forecast for the past couple of years, and we're very happy to have him back. Ladies and gentlemen, from the City of Edmonton, Mr. John Rose. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to be here. As was mentioned, this is my third outing at this, and it's an event that I always look forward to. It's very important as an economist monitoring a regional economy to interact as closely as you can with the business community. So coming to forums like this where I have an opportunity to actually speak with individuals about issues and concerns they may have is very important for me. So please do, if you have any questions, if you have any comments after my presentation, don't hesitate to buttonhole me after I've finished my speech. Well, let's move ahead. What I'm going to do today is walk you through a program where we start with a very broad picture. I'm going to talk a little bit about the international environment that we're operating in. It's very critical from the point of view of Edmonton to be cognizant of what's going on in the external environment. It's very easy to get locked into a view that's, shall we say, overly positive because of the very, very good conditions we're experiencing here in Edmonton. So I'm going to start off with perhaps a bit of a downer, talk about what's going on in Europe, the United States, elsewhere. We'll drop down, spend some time talking about Canada, Alberta, and then Edmonton. Obviously, when you're talking about the Edmonton economy, you can't go very far without mentioning energy prices. We'll discuss that as well. And then I'd like to bring up some current indicators, employment, inflation rates, that kind of thing. And then I'll turn to the longer-term forecast. We'll talk about what the outlook is like further out. And in particular, I want to highlight where I see some key opportunities for growth in the region, what will be driving the economy in the coming couple of years. And then finally, a little bit of a review of the risks, both upside and downside risks to the outlook for the Edmonton economy. Well, as I'm sure everyone is aware, at the broadest level, and the global context, we continue to experience a very, very sluggish, slow recovery in the international environment. Growth in 2012 was disappointingly slow, particularly in Europe and the United States. In fact, the Eurozone is back in recession, and there's no expectation that the Euro area is going to improve anytime soon. As well, we saw very, very anemic results in the United States. Employment growth was slow. We saw China slowing down, and all of that created a context in the international environment which was relatively negative. Now, the good news is, over the last several months, particularly in the third and fourth quarter, we've seen some improvement in the U.S. economy around housing, automobiles, consumer spending. Consumer debt is down in the United States. That's good news. Unfortunately, the bad side of that is that a lot of that debt reduction is a result of defaults on mortgages. But nonetheless, consumer debt is down. Consumer spending is up in the United States. So we should see some improvement in the U.S. economy in the months to come. As I mentioned, Eurozone is flat in its back, not going anywhere. But we have seen some improvement in China. The Chinese economy slowed significantly from very rapid rates of growth in the early parts of 2012 down to about 6.5%. Their economy is beginning to show some signs of life. So that's a good sign as well. So coming into 2013, We've been through a relatively depressed period in 2012 internationally. 2013, from a global perspective, should be a somewhat better year, the exception being the Eurozone. Now, what does that mean for Canada, for Alberta, and for Edmonton? In the Canadian context, 2012 was a mediocre year, around 2% growth. I expect we'll see the same, around 2%, maybe a little lower, maybe a little higher. But what we're going to see is a shift in the way the Canadian economy is growing. Up until now, consumer spending, housing, business investment have been the key drivers to the Canadian economy. That's what's really kept us going over the last 24 months. That's coming to an end. As we all know, levels of consumer debt are very, very high in Canada. Hence, we can't expect consumer spending to drive the economy forward. Housing construction is going to slow somewhat in the year to come. So the domestic side of the Canadian economy is going to be slower. But as I mentioned, we've had some positive developments in the United States and in China, particularly around housing and automobiles in the United States. And that's very, very good news for Canada in terms of our export performance. Automotive exports are up strongly. This is very, very good for Ontario in particular, but a benefit to the national economy. And with the U.S. housing market improving, we've seen some improvement in Canadian forestry exports. And so this is going to be the story in 2013. The Canadian economy will continue to grow at relatively modest rates, but it's going to be export-led as opposed to being driven by developments on the domestic side. Nonetheless, a respectable year in 2013 for the Canadian economy. When we come to Alberta, the story is much, much better. We're going to be seeing growth in the Alberta economy, somewhat slower than what we experienced, or I should say somewhat better than what we experienced this year, or in 2012. The Alberta economy is going to be moving forward at very, very respectable rates. Again, probably one of the fastest growing jurisdictions in North America, with the possible exception of North Dakota. But Alberta is going to be doing very, very well indeed. And again, this is largely a reflection of continued strong investment activity related to oil sands and other energy-related developments. When we get down to the city of Edmonton, we're going to see growth slow just a little bit from what we've experienced in 2012. And that's largely a result of the fact that we now have a very, very tight labor market. As I'll talk about in a few moments, unemployment rates are very low in the city of Edmonton, relatively speaking. And this is putting a bit of a bind on employers in terms of identifying the help they need to grow. And so as a result, our economy is going to slow modestly in the year to come. But no significant drop in activity, just a moderation in terms of the rate of growth. Now, as I mentioned, when you're talking about Edmonton and Alberta, you can't go very far without talking about energy prices. And the continued growth in Alberta and Edmonton's continued strong performance is heavily dependent on activity in the energy sector, particularly increased investment activity. And what we saw with respect to oil prices last year was a bit of a mixed bag. We came into 2012 with record high oil prices. Oil prices were well above $100 a barrel. This is the West Texas Intermediate price out of Cushing, Oklahoma, the North American benchmark. And as you can see, for the first several months of this year, we had very, very strong oil prices. Those oil prices came down significantly as it became apparent that we weren't going to see the kind of growth we wanted in the United States. The Chinese economy had slowed. We had continued problems in the Eurozone, and that depressed international oil prices as well as prices in North America. So we saw oil prices come down rather significantly, down into the $80 barrel range. But in the latter half of the year, we've seen prices recover somewhat, back up to the $90 barrel range. Now, the good news is that at $90 a barrel, that's more than adequate to continue to sustain investment activity in the Canadian oil sands. So that's the good news. The bad news is that the provincial government in particular was forecasting $100 a barrel, and with 25 to 30% of their budget dependent on natural resource revenues, that overestimate of oil prices has left them with a very significant gap in their budget, which they're going to be hard-pressed to fill. I don't expect oil prices to move up significantly in the year to come. They should hover around $90 to $93 a barrel. So again, good news is we should see some stability and ongoing growth in the energy sector, but no massive boom in the sense that oil prices will not be up as high as they were at the beginning of 2012. Now, that's the overall picture of West Texas Intermediate. Underlying that are some serious issues which have negative implications for the longer-term outlook for Alberta and for Edmonton. The blue line in the middle there is the West Texas Intermediate price. That's the price I was talking about a few moments ago. And that's set in Cushing, Oklahoma, as I mentioned. And that's the North American benchmark. The red line is what's called Brent crude price. That's the international benchmark price. That's for crude coming out of the North Sea and off England. And as you'll notice, up until around 2010, the Cushing, Oklahoma price, the U.S. price, and the international prices moved essentially in lockstep. Sometimes a little higher, sometimes a little lower, but they were very closely related. Since 2010, we've seen an increasing gap between the U.S. benchmark price and the international price. And there's no great mystery behind this. This simply reflects the fact that the United States, both in terms of demand for oil, the demand for oil in the United States is actually falling. It has been falling for several years. And the supply of oil, the amount of oil that the U.S. is producing, particularly out of areas like the Bakken Field in North Dakota, has been going up. With demand falling and supply going up, the obvious result is prices in the United States have been relatively depressed vis-a-vis the international standard. So we've got this gap between the red line and the blue line. That's the international gap. That's opened up as a result of supply and demand conditions in North America. The green line at the bottom there is the Canadian price, the Canadian benchmark price. And as you'll notice, typically the Canadian benchmark price has been somewhat below the U.S. and international prices, again, up until about 2010. That reflected pipeline transportation costs, differences in the quality of the crude, et cetera, et cetera. But again, since about 2010, we've seen a growing gap between what the Canadian producers get and what even U.S. producers get in terms of the WTI, and certainly a massive gap between the international prices and our price. And the gap between us and the blue line reflects the fact that we simply do not have the pipeline export capacity to move the amount of oil out of this province and to markets where we can get higher prices. And until we see significant new investment in pipeline capacity either to Eastern Canada, to the U.S. Gulf Coast, to the Pacific Coast, you're going to continue to see this very broad, wide gap. And this is not good news. If this gap persists, we're going to see a slowdown in investment in the energy sector in Alberta. It simply doesn't make any sense to expand capacity in a market where you cannot get anything close to world prices. So we need to be very, very sensitive to this and keep a weather eye out for future developments in terms of additional pipeline capacity for Alberta. Natural gas, no big mystery here. With the advent of tight gas supplies in the United States, particularly in Pennsylvania, Texas, and other areas, natural gas prices collapsed. They are at or near record lows. And during the course of 2012, we saw really very, very depressed natural gas prices throughout North America. Again, just massive oversupply. We've seen recently natural gas prices move up a little bit. This reflects the fact that the United States experienced its warmest year on record, and massive amounts of natural gas were burned up, generating electricity to run air conditioning systems. But bottom line is natural gas prices are at the bottom. They're not going to go up anytime soon. Hence, we have a situation where the oil side of our economy will continue to do well, assuming we do get some relief in terms of new pipeline capacity. But on the natural gas side, things are going to be pretty slow, with the exception of some drilling that's going to go on where they're actually drilling for the liquids associated with the natural gas, not the natural gas itself. So we have a situation where the energy side of the economy is a bit mixed, and that's good news in the sense that we're not going to drive a massive boom on the energy side of the economy in the next couple of years. Moving ahead here, in terms of Edmonton's economic performance, I can only say I'm the envy of my colleagues in the Eastern Canada. Whenever I'm back talking to my friends in Eastern Canada, they say, well, you know, gee, John, it must be great being the chief economist for one of the fastest growing jurisdictions in Canada. I mean, you don't have any problems. Well, at one level, that's true. What we've seen is an absolutely stellar performance on the part of the Edmonton economy in terms of job generation. This illustrates the unemployment rate. We had new numbers that came out last week. I wasn't able to update the chart in time, unfortunately. But our current unemployment rate is now around 4.3%. And that is the lowest unemployment rate in Canada for any metropolitan area. We're tied with Regina for the lowest unemployment rate in Canada. Truly stellar performance in terms of job generation. The downside to that is we're getting very, very close to the 4% unemployment rate. Once you get below 5% unemployment, that's the sort of rule of thumb is you're getting into a tight labor market. When you get below 4%, that's when you ignite widespread shortages and you get into wage price spirals, such as what we saw in 2005, 2006, 2007. We're bouncing around that 4% rate right now. I expect we'll be below 4% in the not too distant future. And the message here is that while that's good for job seekers, it's very difficult for employers. And as I mentioned, this is going to be a key constraint in growth for the coming year. Simply, employers are not going to be able to find the skills, the talent, the experience they need to grow their businesses in the way they might want to. So it's a break on the economy at this point. As I said, though, good news if you're a job seeker. And just to emphasize how relatively strong the Edmonton economy is compared both to Alberta and obviously to the rest of Canada, I've put up some more detailed information. The deep blue bar at the top there is the rate of growth of employment. And as you can see, Edmonton is creating jobs at a rate of over 3 times the national average and well above the provincial average as well. The red bar is the rate of growth of the labor force. That is the number of people looking for work. And as you can see, we're generating more jobs than people are entering the labor force, hence the drop in unemployment rate. But nonetheless, our labor force is also growing much more quickly than almost anywhere else in the country. And finally, and this is of particular import for your group, is the light blue bar, which is the growth in the working age population. This is how many people have moved into the economy 16 years and above. That is an indicator of net migration. Rule of thumb, somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of that growth is a result of net immigration. And as you can see, our working age population is growing at over 3%. Again, 2.5 to 3 times the national average. And most of that is net immigration. People are pouring into this city. We're doing an absolutely remarkable job in terms of attracting and retaining people in this economy to try and move our economy forward. But again, as you can see, the working age population growth is also below our employment growth. So even though we're doing a remarkable job, one of the best performances in the country, in North America, we still aren't able to attract enough people to move our economy forward as quickly as it could. So we're a labor-constrained economy. It's a good constraint to have, but nonetheless, there it is. And just to put the nail in the coffin of this one, I love this slide. This is employment growth in the 10 top metropolitan areas in Canada. And as you can see, we're number 1. While Toronto and Montreal have really picked up their socks over the last couple of months, and that again reflects recovery in the automotive industry and manufacturing in Ontario and Quebec, their performance is slowing down, and I would expect them to drop down a little bit in the months to come. But as you can see, Edmonton has experienced the most rapid growth of any major metropolitan area in Canada. And I expect that that will continue in the year to come as our economy continues to move forward. Finally, the other key issue that one needs to keep in mind when talking about Edmonton in terms of growth is obviously inflation. And as I've been mentioning, with a very, very tight labor market, cost pressures are mounting. Now, the good news is that inflation, as measured by the Consumer Price Index in Edmonton, is very, very low, well below 1%. Now, that's the good news. We don't seem to have an inflationary problem at the moment. The bad news is that the only reason the inflation rate is that low is because we've had relatively depressed gasoline prices, and we've got a freeze on electricity rates. The electricity freeze, the electricity rates are going to move up this year. I expect gasoline prices are probably going to move up this year as well. So you're going to see inflation pick up quite significantly in the year to come. We've enjoyed a period of very, very modest price increases, but that's about to come to an end. Expect inflation to pick up to 2 to 2.5% in the year to come. That's not by any means a deal breaker in terms of growth of the economy, but it's going to be a significant change compared to what people have been experiencing over the past year, where inflation, as I say, has been very, very muted. So finally, bringing it all together, where are we going in terms of growth, GDP growth? The blue bars here are the Edmonton Census Metropolitan Area. That's basically what people refer to as the capital region, the region including the counties around the city of Edmonton. And as you can see, the region, I estimate, grew by over 4% in 2012. I expect that that actually is an underestimate. When the numbers are in, I think probably regional growth will be 4.5%, maybe even higher. Similarly, the city of Edmonton grew, I estimate, at just under 4% in 2012. Again, I think that was a bit of an undershoot given the strength in employment growth that we've seen. I expect that actually when I revise these estimates, they're going to be closer to 4% for the city as well. Looking forward, as I mentioned, growth is going to moderate somewhat both in the region and in the city. The region is going to continue to outperform the city, and that reflects basically differences in the structure of the economies. In the region, we have, in the city of Edmonton, obviously we've got provincial government, we have major educational institutions, healthcare institutions, and when the economy is growing, they tend to grow less quickly than the private sector does, whereas in the surrounding periphery, you have much more focus on things like construction, manufacturing, transportation services, those kinds of things, which are going to be growing slightly faster than the city as a whole, or the city of Edmonton proper. But nonetheless, growth is going to be in the 4% range coming in 2013. But we're going to continue to slow down over the next couple of years. And this, again, basically is a reflection of the fact that we're labor constrained. If we could get more people, we could grow this economy more quickly. That, unfortunately, is not proving to be the case. We're stuck at around 3 to 4% growth with population growing maybe around 2.5 to 3%, productivity 1% on top of that. That leaves us at around 3.5 to 4%. And that slows down as the population growth slows and the population ages. Towards the end of the forecast, we have a bit of an uptick, and that reflects something of the profile of investment around oil sands, some assumptions I've made about significant new investments further out in 2019, 2020, 2021. We'll see growth tick up to well over 3%. Again, that's predicated on the assumption that we do get significant new pipeline capacity for Alberta, and hopefully particularly pipeline capacity that gets us to tidewater on the Pacific coast, ideally. But nonetheless, the economy is going to be doing much, much better than the national economy. The Canadian economy is going to be bumping along at somewhere between 1.5% and 2% growth over this period. So Edmonton is going to continue to be one of the fastest growing areas in the province and will continue to attract migrants to the region. And so we should see continued population growth, and with continued population growth and significant net in-migration, that's going to mean a relatively buoyant housing market for Edmonton in the years to come. Now, where is this growth going to come from? Well, Up till now, as I mentioned, much of the growth has been on the manufacturing side, particularly metal fabrication, machinery, food products, that kind of thing. And manufacturing is going to continue to be an area of strength for the region as we continue to support activities elsewhere in the northern half of the province. Transportation and logistics. Edmonton is the gateway to northern Alberta and northern Canada, and will continue to perform that function. So transportation, logistics, warehousing, all of that is going to continue to do very, very well as we continue to see increased levels of activity in the northern half of the province. Construction, particularly residential construction, and in particular renovation and maintenance within the residential sector is going to continue to be strong, and that of course reflects the fact that we're going to have a very, very good demographic profile, growing population needs houses, and as Dan is going to discuss in a little bit further, we'll see reasonably buoyant housing construction area activity in the region as well over the coming year. But what we're going to see more and more of is the economy starting to pivot away from those energy-dependent areas like manufacturing, transportation, construction, and more towards the consumer side of the economy. With the employment growth we've seen, we've got wage growth as well, we've got population growth, the consumer side of the Edmonton economy is going to really come into its own in 2013. So areas like retail, hospitality, personal services are all going to really pick up over the next 12 to 24 months. And it's going to be that consumer side of the economy which is going to give Edmonton the edge when it comes to growth in the next 12 to 24 months. So look for increases in those areas of activity. The only downside to that is those areas, consumer side of the economy, tends to have lower wages and salaries than manufacturing and construction does, but that's not really going to impede growth in the years to come. We should see a very robust, very respectable growth performance for the region in the next year. Now, what are the risks here and for the outlook? And if you'd asked me 6 months ago, I would have said the risks are on the downside, that if anything, I was going to get a surprise on the negative. But as I've mentioned, we've seen improvements in the U.S. economic performance, in China, internationally, and so I'm a bit more optimistic than I was 6 months ago. And I think actually we're in a relatively balanced situation. I don't anticipate a very sharp negative surprise or sharp positive surprise, but nonetheless, things to watch out for in the year to come. Again, I can't emphasize enough the problems that are developing in the Canadian oil sector, particularly with respect to the discounts that we're currently experiencing in oil prices. And until we see a resolution of that, there's a big cloud on the horizon. As I mentioned, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to invest money in a region where you're only getting $60 a barrel, where you can make investments internationally and get over $100 a barrel. And that's going to hit us sooner rather than later. The other area of concern that I had, and again, that's been alleviated a little bit with developments in the U.S. Over the past several weeks. They've avoided the so-called fiscal cliff, but that melodrama isn't over yet. They avoided the, quote, fiscal cliff, but basically they simply moved the goal line 2 months in. You're going to have an equally ugly, unpleasant debate around what's known as the debt ceiling in the United States, starting in March, and as well some of the elements of the fiscal cliff, specifically significant government cuts, cuts in government spending, called sequestration. They come up again for debate in March. So get ready for another soap opera in Washington, D.C. around the U.S. budget starting in March, and that could undercut consumer confidence and business confidence in the United States and slow things down. Europe, well, what can one say? It continues to not go anywhere. And I don't expect that you're going to see a significant resolution in Europe. It's a very unfortunate situation. You have a situation now in Spain and in Greece where if you're under 25 years old, the likelihood is you're unemployed. Over 50% unemployment for youth in those countries. Unemployment is at record levels in the Eurozone. Unfortunately, the policy mix which has been implemented in Europe is not the best. They're basically making their problems worse with the austerity programs they've instituted. The United Kingdom has done the same thing. They're basically killing their own growth. So I wouldn't expect anything nice to happen in Europe. Canadian housing market. Now, as I mentioned, I'm very optimistic about the housing markets in Edmonton. We've got population growth, demographics, income, all are pointing in the right direction. But obviously, we've got problems in Toronto, Vancouver, and to a lesser extent, Montreal. And my concern is that people are going to be watching those developments, watching prices fall elsewhere in Canada, big headlines, how Canadian house prices are down, and that people are going to forget the fact that prices in Edmonton aren't down, prices in Canada might be down. And so what we could have is a situation where housing stumbles in other areas of the country, and that spooks consumers on this side in Edmonton, and that's very bad news because, as I mentioned, I'm hoping that the consumer side of the Edmonton economy is going to move forward. So if we have consumer confidence undercut significantly by problems in the Canadian housing sector, that could be a real negative for Edmonton as well. Finally, a sudden slowdown in the emerging economies. Well, we've seen some good news out of China, so I'm not too concerned about that. But nonetheless, we could see a situation where a slowdown in Brazil, where growth has come down significantly, and elsewhere in South Asia, India, where growth has slowed as well. This could depress commodity prices, and again, that would not be good news for Alberta or Edmonton. On the upside, as I mentioned, we've seen some increased momentum in the U.S. economy. I'm very bullish about the U.S. economy. Bullish in the sense that I think growth is going to be better than what we expected. Again, assuming that people in Washington, D.C. don't make complete idiots of themselves in March. The other potential upside is Europe. They may patch over their issues, and in particular, I think there's a growing awareness in Europe and globally that the austerity programs that they've implemented are not working, and in fact making the problems worse, and they could revise those policies and see improved growth. And finally, and I think that this is, again, probably one of the key positives in the forecast is we could see significant improvements in growth in China and many of the other emerging markets. And that, of course, obviously would be good for commodity prices and hence good for investment in the energy sector and other areas of the Alberta economy. So I think we've got a balanced outlook. As I say, I'm a little bit more optimistic than I was 6 months ago, largely because of positive developments in the United States. But there are risks, and we need to be cautious. The Alberta and Edmonton economies are unusually exposed to developments globally. So don't get too hung up about the fact that everything looks really good locally. You have to realize that we're embedded in a relatively risky and relatively volatile international environment, which could really bite us in the back if we're not paying close attention. So with that, I'll wrap it up. And as I mentioned, I'm going to be here through the course of the day. And I'm very, very happy to take your questions and look forward to your comments. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity to address you today. Thanks.
John Rose, City of Edmonton economist. His basic message is, if you're not in Edmonton, it kind of sucks to be you. I think it's the message that we just heard. But obviously some some high praise for the City of Edmonton and some of the things that we have going on here with migration and so on. John, thank you very much. I'd like to introduce our next speaker who's spoken at this event for the past couple of times and really is a terrific guy and a terrific speaker, and he's done just so much in the city as well, which I think is really important. I want to take a moment to point out, everybody knows Angus Watt from his 50 appearances a week on Global TV and 630 CHED Radio. But what I'd like to talk about for a moment is some of the work that he's done in our community. The list is really long, so I can't get into everything, but he's a past recipient of the Investment Dealers Association Program of Distinction Award for the Prairie Region, chair of the United Way of Northern Alberta on 2 occasions, a past director and chair of the Edmonton Police Foundation, past board member of the TELUS Community Foundation. Angus is a recipient of the Paul Harris Fellow, which was awarded by the Rotary Club of Canada. So he's certainly done a ton of work in the community. People know him as Central Alberta's Business Authority, And the Realtors are very pleased to welcome with his presentation Mr. Angus Watt. It's all yours, sir.
Thanks, Brent. Good morning. Good morning, Angus. All right. You know, first of all, Grant, thank you very much for the kind introduction. And I also want to thank and congratulate the organizers, because from a speaker's point of view, to be up here and be able to see myself down here is really refreshing for me, but I get to see the slides, so I know what I'm talking about. And it's just to have the turnout and to have the technology and be on the leading edge, I'm sure it makes you feel very proud that you're part of it. So to the organizers, congratulations. Now I got to make sure I know how to run everything. That's me. I just want you to know this picture is fixed because Jane Alm is a lot shorter than I am. So I push this button. I push this button. Any lawyers? Good. Okay. And don't take that the wrong way. Or anyways, have fun. Now, some of you have heard me speak before, and I always like to start off with the story of one day I was in the office of Dr. Allard. And many of you are probably too young to remember Dr. Allard. But for me, it was kind of an interesting learning curve, because I'm in his office, and we're talking about different things, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, he asked me the question. And I'm sure you all know the answer. Angus, what are the 3 most important things when you're investing in real estate? And I said, with a great amount of pride, location, location, location. And he went, ah, so. This is a long time ago, which meant, you're wrong, grasshopper. He said, it's staying power, staying power, staying power. And I thought for a moment, well, everybody knows this location, location, location. And I thought, well, first of all, I'm not going to correct Dr. Allard. Then I'm thinking about it. Why would you buy a piece of property that you didn't want? Then I thought about it, that he had many friends that lost everything they had. They lost their businesses. They had to go bankrupt. Because in a period of high interest rates, they didn't have the staying power. So they ended up with half-built apartments. They ended up with half-built rigs. They just ran out of money. They didn't have the staying power. So it doesn't matter what time you're in, whether you're in a bullish period of time, everybody's excited about things going higher, or whether things are going to get worse. You got to make sure that you have the staying power, whether you're investing or working on your own business. So that's the first message I've had over the last 30 years. And then when we went through 2001 and 2002 and trying to get back on track in 2008 and 2009, I reminded everybody, hey, every morning we get up. With what purpose? To make life better. We're part of growth. That's what makes us tick. And I don't think economists put enough of that animal instinct into their numbers and insight. So I say, hey, we're addicted to growth. In this province, we know we're addicted to oil as well. And that hasn't changed. Knowing, being in an agricultural province, whether it be or a commodity province, whether it be agriculture, oil, and gas, we know that commodity prices go up and they go lower. I remember a chap saying the best spot for natural gas is in the ground because it's only going to go up from that aspect. So as we go forward, energy we're addiction to. But I will tell you, when I try to forecast what's going to happen in 2013, it's very challenging. Very, very challenging. As John pointed out a few minutes ago, what's happening in the United States, the Congress there between the Republicans and the Democrats, you wonder, it's like a divorce. You know, X is trying to negotiate a settlement and they don't like each other. And the longer they get at it, the uglier it seems to get. And so when we have this debt ceiling crisis just around the corner, is that, you know, I don't see them wanting to get together any faster than they did before. So as I go through and I'm trying to say, what's going to happen in 2013 and 2014? And you look back to what's saved us in 2012 and what saved us in 2011 and 10, and before that, is that our interest rates have been substantially lower than we ever would have anticipated before those years started. And that's been done on purpose by the central banks, including the Bank of Canada, but more visibly by the Federal Reserve. So as we go forward today, I want you to understand we also have an addiction to low interest rates. And you say, oh, that's good. Hey, that's good for the real estate market. But just remember this one point. If you know anybody that's had an addiction problem, it's very, very difficult for them to get off that addiction, to end that addiction. So if you ever think we're going to go back to a normal level, then you have to understand that interest rates could go higher. And as interest rates go higher, as anybody else who has an addiction problem, we have to be prepared for short-term pain for long-term gain. And that's the important part, I think, of the message that I want to leave with you today. You know what's interesting? Excuse me, it does get dry up here, eh, John? It's interesting, President Reagan observed, nothing in Washington is so permanent as a temporary government program. For the first time in history, with interest rates being as low as they are today, they haven't had any impact. You haven't had the recovery. You may have felt like in 2012, you've had an economic recovery and the consumer is stronger. And employment's growing, it's rebounding in the United States from a very high level of unemployment. That's what it may feel like. But we're going to take a look and tell you that's not necessarily the case as we go forward. Also, the ground rules have changed. And I say they've changed because if you go back to the days of in the 1970s with President Carter and Paul Volcker, before I got in this industry, when I was still in school and didn't have to wear a tie, so I'm not that old, okay? But I want you to know that at that time, the Federal Reserve in the United States, they made inflation public enemy number one. So for the last 35 years of my life, inflation has always been public enemy number one. Now this December 2nd, or December 12th in 2012, the Federal Reserve came out after their meetings and they made some interesting new observations. They created new history. The first thing they talked about, because during the summertime they talked about that interest rates in the United States were going to stay low for a prolonged period of time, probably until the mid-2015. So the markets got excited and say, hey, we know now that interest rates are going to stay low until the summer of 2015, then we'll worry about it. But on December 12th, they took out those words. And you kind of go, what are they going to tell us now? Because we read each word so carefully. They went on to say that going forward, we're going to focus on unemployment. Unemployment or employment of our U.S. citizens is the number one concern of the Federal Reserve. Now I have to tell you, it shouldn't be the central bank's position to be worried about employment. But that is now their new focus. And you say 6.5%, and you say, well, we're at 7.7% today. Okay, we'll get there. And with that focus, we know we're going to get there. They talked about inflation. They said inflation, going back to John's point earlier, inflation 2.5%. They said that 2.5% inflation is okay. Then they went on to say, you know what? If we had a little bit more inflation than that for a period of time, so our long-term inflation rate can't be more than 2.5%. So if we got 3%, give or take a little bit, that's okay too, because unemployment is so important to us. Now, you've got these slides, so some of these slides, for the sake of time, I'm going to go over quickly. But I want you to understand that the housing market in the United States is $10 to $12 trillion. U.S. economy, and please remember this number, the U.S. economy, GDP, $14.5 trillion. Okay? U.S. debt is currently trading, is $16.4 trillion, so they have, it's like a Visa card, they're at their limit of 16.4, and the economy is 14.5. In the United States, now I want you to have an understanding that the problems that we have in the world today didn't just start, okay? If you went back in time, when did interest rates become artificially low? I would tell you probably on September 11th, 2001. Because Alan Greenspan and President Bush wanted to get the stock markets open, wanted to have confidence, so they put money into the system, brought down interest rates, so we all felt good and comfortable. Because low interest rates have a feeling of doing that. You say, hey, my cost of money is cheap, and the game's on, it costs me a lot less to play, so put me in for another round. So that's, in the United States, when I would suggest that the low interest rates dilemma started. So you take a look, and we're now, and I left the estimate in there because when I gave this speech in the fall and during the summer, we estimated we'd be at $16.4 trillion today, and we're here. And I leave that in because we're looking at an estimate of 2015 of 19 trillion. So this problem isn't going away. Now, let's put this in simple arithmetic. If we take out 8 zeros, so we're talking about a family budget, and think about this, if you had a son or daughter that's making $21,000 a year, and they told you that they spent $38,000, how are you going to feel? You're going to say, they're crazy. This young generation, how can they do this? But this is the Congress and the President of the United States. That their income is roughly family income is $21,000. They're spending $38,000. The new credit card debt is $16,500. How much is their credit card owing? $142,000. Now you run into the room as soon as you find this out and you tell your son or daughter or your spouse and you say, this can't go on. I said, don't worry about it. We've taken care of it. We've made some cutbacks. And you're thinking, okay, what have they cut back? They've overspent by $16,000. Yeah, we cut out this bill for $385, right? That's the effort they've made to control the spending in the United States today. So when we take a look at jobs, we take a look, in a nutshell, in the United States, yes, unemployment's coming down, but the vast majority of creation is in part-time jobs, not full-time jobs. This is the next important part, okay? Because in the United States, even though unemployment's coming down, the labor force, now the labor force is people that are over 16, you got people that are working, people that are looking for work that are unemployed. Then you have another part of the participation, people that are not looking for work. And what we're going to see is that people that are looking for work effectively has really diminished. In Canada, our labor force is roughly 66% of our total population that could be working. In the United States, that has been a historical number. But in the last 2 years, the labor force, as far as participation goes, those that are employed and those that are unemployed, has dropped to just over 63. So if we add back and said, if we were in normal times, if we have an economic recovery, then the U.S. unemployment really isn't 7.7%, right? If it's a normal participation, it should be 10.7%, or something over 10.5%. So even though today you take a look at the U.S. economy and you say it's on the road to recovery, I would suggest to you it's not nearly as stable as you might think, because you're creating part-time jobs and you got fewer people looking for work. Well, Angus, this can't be. I'm sure that the U.S. economy is recovering. How many people here, and ladies, you don't have to put up your hand, are over 55? Okay. We're still working. And you want to know something? In the United States, at the bottom, 55 and over, in November, the participation rate is almost 41, where in the average it would be 36.7. So you say, well, maybe we're working because we like it, or B, we're working because it helps our retirement planning. I would suggest, especially in the United States, there's a lot more B than A. When you take a look at the unemployment rate of the people that are over 55, it's only 5.8%. If you take a look at the average, it's 3.5% unemployment. So there's a few more unemployed, but there's more of us looking for work. Now let's focus in on who's going to be buying a house for the very first time, people between the ages of 16 and we'll say 34. Participation rates dropped from 83, 75. It's dropped in every case. Unemployment in those areas, 23.5%, 12.7, 7.9. So unemployment of the people under 34 is substantially higher and fewer people looking for work. Then you take a look at student debt. What's happening? So when you take a look at people under 34, 35 years of age, they have more credit card debt, more student debt, less assets, and a part-time job. How do they make a commitment when they're in that type of situation? It's hard. So when you take a look at demographic growth over the next 3 years, you take a look at it, this is a time that the U.S. housing market should be really taking off in demographics with these first-time buyers. But if they don't have the money, they don't have the resources, then it's difficult for them to buy a home. And the second part of this problem is when you have the disparity in the United States where maybe in North Dakota unemployment's 4% and somewhere else in New York City or New York State it's 8.5%, you say, well, listen, historically people will move from New York State to North Dakota to get a job. But if you're down on your value of your home, if you're losing money, and you got to move to North Dakota and either rent or buy a house that's a lot more expensive, you say, why would I move? Because now you've just given me more entitlements, unemployment, to stay where I am. So I don't have to take a loss on the selling of my home. So we take a look at commercial bank loans in the States. They're up, finally. Take a look at corporations. They're making good money in the United States, especially on their international business. Leading indicators have been strong, okay, but they're weakening. The trend is down. It's going in the wrong direction. Resale of homes in the States, they're rebounding, but from the basement, the very bottom of the basement. And you take a look at home supply, the inventory. Now what's really important here is as your sales are higher, your denominator changes. Because if you sell 1,000 homes in a month, then your denominator is 1,000. If it's only 100 homes sold in a month, then it's only 100. So as retail or resale homes slow down, all of a sudden that inventory will start to grow again, or could grow again. Resale markets have been improving. You say, Angus, I'm still bullish. You take a look at it. Housing starts on an annual rate. Yes, they're moving up, a gain from the bottom. Affordability. There's something very interesting in this chart, so hopefully you can see it on your printouts. But take a look. Affordability in the United States on the far right-hand side is 198.5. 100 or higher is very affordable. So in the United States, homes are very affordable today. What's interesting when you go through this is the family income in 2009 in the States was just over $61,000. Now we're in 2012, the end of 2012, and it's $61,752. So it's really stabilized. So if you're working, you're doing okay. And the price of homes are more affordable. That's the good news. The price of homes have moved up from January of 2012 from 154 to 178. But notice what's happened to mortgage rates. Mortgage rates from January 2012, 4.37% for the long-term mortgage in the States, which is tax deductible, down to 3.57. The Federal Reserve has deliberately continued to bring down interest rates even though the price of homes have been recovering. Why? It's because they need the Americans to build up equity. This is their time to kind of make them feel good, because otherwise they could go into a deep depression or recession. So what the Federal Reserve is doing is artificially continuing to push down, because we all know that in a period of time when things are starting to move higher, that our interest rates, when they're artificially low, the logic would be that they should be moving higher as well. Now, this is from PIMCO, which is one of the largest mortgage and bond managers in the world. And their message here is that home ownership in the United States is not increasing, it's still very much decreasing. The homes, the inventories in the United States are being bought by institutions, financial people with money, and pension funds, okay? So that's where the inventory is going. In the meantime, the rental business is increasing. I heard on Bloomberg yesterday that the rental business in the States is now at an 11-year high. Home ownership has dropped down to about 62%. It's on its way down to about 64.5%. But my guess is home ownership will get back to somewhere in the range of 62 to 63%. You hear the stories of people are buying homes in Detroit and in Buffalo, and they can have them paid back when they rent them out over 7 or 10 years. That's what investors are doing. But there's not homeowners. And just by proof in the pudding, you say, well, in Canada, hey, everything's fine. And it's pretty good because People with equity in their house represents 87% of the Canadian households have 25% equity in their house or higher. Okay? 25% of the Americans with homes are in a negative value on their house as far as their mortgage goes. So that takes away mobility of the U.S. where they can go to work. You take a look, our income and debt, we're continuing. The Americans, you can see, are feeling this difficult times, and they're reducing their debt. In Canada, we're not. And that's why our Minister of Finance, Jim Flaherty, is so concerned about making sure. That's why the Bank of Canada has acted 4 times in the last 4 years to make mortgages more difficult, because they don't think Canadians realize that real estate prices don't always go straight up. You take a look at the affordability in Canada, and we all know that Vancouver isn't affordable, but in the index where 100 is affordable or higher, 100 or higher, Vancouver is at 48.3, Toronto's at 70, Calgary's at 107, and here in Edmonton is 131. So the good news for us here, homes in Edmonton on an average Alberta family income in Edmonton are still very affordable. When you take a look at the New World Order, going back to John's point, it's the emerging countries where the growth is going to be. It's not in Europe, it's mature. You take a look at the United States, they're mature. And the only way that they're really going to have growth is to continue to discount their currency. So the question of the day that we have from 2013 is really what happens if the central banks start to, 1, raise interest rates, unemployment remains high in the United States, and government social spending, the entitlements, especially Obamacare, gets cut. Because when you take a look at the U.S. government, and you take a look at even our provincial budget, 80% of our budget goes into healthcare and education and advanced education. Then 80% of the budget at the university and the hospitals and education goes to salaries. So when you start cutting back the healthcare and the education, you're effectively cutting jobs. Doesn't matter what government you're in. And this is not a new problem that's being created. And if you take a look in the United States, how their high schools are falling behind in the educational program, you want to make sure that this doesn't happen here in this province or in Canada. You take a look at the history, how do we get out of these recessions? Well, Eisenhower, he decided to build roads all across Canada. He didn't want to give us a favor, right? That was a joke. It wasn't across Canada. Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, after World War II, he wanted to have the highways all across the United States, like I-80 and I-90, so that Americans could travel back and forth, because now they have cars. Then you take a JFK one, getting America moving again. We had Mr. Ford started the assembly line so he could reduce the cost of a car from $850 down to about $350, so every American could buy a car. Then we had Mr. Carrier and Mr. Otis on the elevators. That gave us the ability, air conditioning and elevators gave us the ability to have buildings that are over 8 stories tall, which certainly changed downtown, of course. Then we had telephones, Mr. Bell. We had air travel. So we became global. Then we became digital with computers and internet and cell phones to promote global growth. But how many people here have been following the story in Apple lately? Apple shares went from $500, $600 up to $700 because of the international sales. And now today they're around $525 in the last 2 or 3 months. Why? It's because the market fears there's no more innovation left at Apple. Your telephones, your iPhones, your iPads, they get bigger, they get smaller, but most of the innovation is behind. It doesn't have a lot of manpower either. So effectively, the technology that we have today is becoming a commodity. And we know what happens when things become a commodity. It's always going to be the lowest price. It's just a question of cost plus. The concept of the technology and the advanced technology is behind us. So when I look into 2013, if interest rates don't stay low, we have a lot of problems in front of us because we don't have anything else to stimulate us. We have been fortunate and guided in the last 4 years in this province because we've been spending our province $3 billion every year in infrastructure. That's created roughly 70,000 jobs. When you've got a workforce of 2.1 million people, somewhere between 2 million and 2.1, that means in the last 4 years, we've added to our employment by 3.5%. Or put differently, our unemployment has been lower by 3.5%. But as we go forward, without low interest rates, We've got some challenging times ahead of us. And so, it worked. It's a great feeling when you're a speaker and your clicker works. Going forward, infrastructure spending. You know, on Global last night, they're talking about the subway over in London is 100 years old. The oldest subway that they have, I believe, in Europe. But certainly it needs a huge amount of repairs. Bridges in the United States, the infrastructure, the schools, the hospitals that we need here in this province. You take a look at it. So infrastructure spending going forward in 2013 and beyond, if we can find the ways to afford it. Not just us here in Alberta, but in the whole world, and especially in the United States. Agriculture is going to be good for us. You know, by the time they get to 2050, they're saying there are 9 billion people in this world. And if we don't use fertilizers, we don't have enhanced grains and crops, they say we'll have to cut down every forest so we'd have enough food for the people on the planet at that time. That's what they say. The challenge we have in this province, going back to Don's message earlier, or John's, is that power has to be inexpensive. We have to have a way to have cheap power. And so I actually think in a funny way that the cheap price of natural gas will be a blessing for us, not a negative. We just have to learn to work within a price structure and see what happens. Healthcare and education. If we don't have healthcare and education, A, we're all going to be older and need the healthcare, but if we don't spend and invest money in education, what are we doing to our youth? What are we robbing them of? Where are we putting ourselves? Where is the United States putting themselves on a world scale? Because I can tell you this. Here's an interesting story. I'm on the Senate at the university, and we were told this about a year ago, is that we used to bring over some, not just the U of A, but the universities in North America and around the world would take some of the brightest students out of China and bring them over, and the science students especially, and we would teach them, train them, and they'd go back, and we had a cooperation, so it was a win-win for everybody. Do you know, going forward now, and it takes them like 9 months to start, build, and fill a university in China, that they're teaching their science classes in English so they can go around the world and get the best professors and lecturers to come and share that knowledge with their students in China. So instead of trying to bring the students from China to the world, they're going to take the very best to teach theirs. And so the question is, are we doing the same thing? So, and the last question here is, as governments around the world take a larger portion of GDP, from 15 to probably 24% in the United States, how does the economy, which is now 75% versus being 85%, afford to pay for the government? Answer is more taxes. And you say, well, is that what we want? So we've got a lot of complications going forward. And so when I take a look at my summary of where we are in 2013, like an audit, corporate balance sheets in the States and in Canada are green. I'll tell you, the oil and gas balance sheets are yellow. On the housing recovery in the United States, I would say is yellow. Green being good and go, yellow being very cautious, red means you got a problem. The auto industry is yellow. It's more yellow in Canada than the United States. We are looking for an increase of auto productions in the United States. The US dollar, it could be under a lot of pressure because I doubt that we're going to get a simple resolve on our debt ceiling come sometime in March. And US unemployment, I would say, is yellow on its way to red. Because if we do get an economic recovery, you'll see more people back in the workforce and you won't see the actual numbers drop. And we could even have a period of time with recovery. We have inflation, we get higher interest rates. And we've been artificially blessed, so to speak, in a careful way, by having low interest rates. So that's my outlook and forecast for 2013. Thank you very much.
Everybody has appreciated the fact that I've been wearing my Angus Watt tie today. I don't know if you folks have watched Global and you sit there and you go, like I do, my God, that man has nice ties. Where does he buy those ties from? So I thought if I'm going to introduce Angus Watt today, I'm going to wear my Angus Watt tie. I have another great honor today to represent and to introduce the publisher of the Edmonton Journal. Our keynote speaker is just moments away. Alison Redford is in the house. I talked to her just a moment ago backstage. Here to introduce the Premier of our province is the publisher of the Edmonton Journal. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. John Conley. Morning, John. You're that tall guy that I saw backstage. We couldn't see one another backstage because it was so dark, and John says, when I get to the stage, I'm the tall, good-looking guy. You'll know me. There he is.
Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure for us to be here today and to sponsor the Realtors Housing Forecast Seminar. I have a team of people here, and I'd like to introduce them if I may. We have here Scott Northfield, who's our sales manager. We have our real estate sales execs, Susan Duffield, Mark Van Mark. And then we have our folks that are manning our booth at the back, and I hope you'll visit them. And that's Rosie and Ryan, Karen and Danae. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the keynote speaker. Just want to tell you that Alberta has a trade balance with the country of China of about $5.6 billion. While this is a large number, it is less than the almost $7 billion in real estate that Edmonton-based realtors will trade this year. The importance of the real estate industry to the health and vitality of our province is underscored by the presence today of the Honourable Alison Redford, Premier of Alberta. Alison Redford was elected leader of the Alberta Progressive Conservative Party on October 1st, 2011. She was just telling me the room we were just sitting in is the room she sat in that night. And she was sworn in as Alberta's 14th Premier on October 7th, 2011. The Premier has been actively involved in both provincial and national politics since the 1980s. She served as Senior Policy Advisor for the Right Honourable Joe Clark when he was Secretary of State for External Affairs and later worked in the Prime Minister's office. In Parliament, she was also the Principal Legislative Advisor to the Secretary of State for External Affairs. In 2005, Alison was appointed by the Secretary General of the United Nations as one of 4 international election commissioners to administer Afghanistan's first parliamentary elections. Alison Redford was elected MLA for the constituency of Calgary-Elbow on March 3, 2008, and named Minister of Justice and Attorney General on March 12, 2008. In this role, she led the Safe Communities Secretariat. In January 2010, she was also named Political Minister for Calgary. With an update on recent and upcoming legislation that might affect the real estate industry, here's the Premier of Alberta, the Honourable Alison Redford.
Well, good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. It's really a pleasure to be able to be here with you today. As John was saying, there's no doubt that the importance of real estate to the Alberta economy is fundamental, and to be able so early in the new year to listen to such optimistic forecasts with respect to our economic growth and your opportunity to be able to contribute to be such an important part of the success of this province really is a privilege. You know, it's an amazing thing to be an Albertan. And I'm sure that over the Christmas holidays, many of us who traveled to other parts of the country or spoke to friends and relatives across the country and around the world heard stories as to what's going on in the rest of the world. And for us to be able to take a look at how blessed we are to live here with the strong economic growth we have, the optimism that we have for the future, and the ability to see that reflected in the work that you do through the housing industry is very exciting, particularly so early in the new year. Because housing is a critical part of our economy, and it's a major indicator of the province's economic well-being. And by all accounts, Alberta is not only in a good position, but a strong position and a leading position in the country, and particularly here in the Edmonton area. We talk about $7 billion in MLS listings last year. And I want to make sure that we're doing everything we can as a government to continue to keep that momentum going so that our economy and your businesses, your careers, and your families continue to thrive. Fortunately, Alberta has stayed resilient even in the midst of global economic uncertainty. And our province continues to attract people from all over Canada and around the world. And our population is growing at its fastest pace since 1980. Last year, over 95,000 people came to Alberta, bringing new investment, businesses, and jobs with them. And our economy expanded by roughly 3.7%, almost double the growth of the rest of Canada and the United States. But our future, as you know, is certainly not without our challenges. As an export-oriented and a commodity-driven economy, we're vulnerable to forces that are beyond our control, beyond our borders, and that give us both challenges and opportunities in the year ahead. Our trading partners continue to struggle with high debt, low growth, and stubborn unemployment. And as we know, lower than expected commodity prices, particularly oil, the sudden drop in oil in the last 2 months, has affected our finances significantly. Thanks to a glut in U.S. markets, oil and gas prices are down, and the price of our oil has fallen to more than $30 below the price for benchmark WTI, which also directly affects our finances. Energy royalties historically have made up almost 30% of the revenue that we rely on to budget for the services that matter to Albertans. And because of these challenges, we have some tough decisions to make. Decisions that will ensure that we can balance and support Albertans while funding the priorities that Albertans believe matter for their families and their communities. We are in an enviable position. Our credit rating, our economy, and the future of our province certainly provide us with great opportunities and the chance to make some choices, although some of them will be difficult choices. We will do everything in our power to meet our commitment to balance the budget. That's fundamental to what we believe as Albertans and progressive Conservatives. Every department has been asked in the last 3 weeks to review its spending plans and to constrain costs for next year's budget. Now, we know from experience that we cannot and will not just put the brakes on everything. We've had that experience before. And we know that if we do that, we end up with a social infrastructure deficit and with a physical infrastructure deficit that simply doesn't allow us to embrace the people that are coming to our province. Because people are coming to our province to make a living, but also to make a life. And we know that there are always ways for us in government, just as in life, to do things and to work more efficiently. And it's one of the reasons that Doug Horner, our President of the Treasury Board and Minister of Finance, introduced results-based budgeting, where we've made a commitment to scrutinize our government operations each year, every year, not just for a 3-year cycle, although that's how long it'll take us to get through it the first time, to scrutinize our government operations to ensure that we are delivering the services that Albertans expect in the most cost-effective way possible. But even as we make some of our tough decisions this year on short-term spending, we won't lose sight of the need to plan for the future. Our population, which is good news for you, is expected to grow by over 1 million in the next 20 years. The need for more infrastructure and new ways of delivering the effective, far-reaching services that Albertans depend on every day will only become more acute. Meeting those demands is just as important in periods of lower growth. And that is how we empower every Albertan to be part of the province's success. Providing access to affordable housing is a key part of that goal. And that's why our government sees so much value in the relationship that we have with the Realtors Association and the housing sector as a whole. We know that people are attracted to this province because of the quality of life that we have. We know we have an Alberta advantage, and we're proud of that. And both of us, government and industry, want to ensure that everyone, including new arrivals to our province, lower-income families, seniors, and others, find a safe and an affordable place to live in this burgeoning economy. Since 2007, more than 12,000 affordable housing units have been developed, and approximately $1.15 billion in government support has been provided to ensure that all Albertans have a safe place to live. Of those units, almost half have been completed, and the remaining housing is expected to become available over the next 2 years at rental rates that are at least 10% below market. Our government is also investing $260 million over 5 years to update and to replace aging government-owned housing, including our seniors' lodges. We're also supporting the housing industry in giving all Albertans the confidence that their home is an investment that will yield solid returns for years to come. And that is why Alberta was the first jurisdiction in Canada to introduce condominium legislation to protect owners' rights. But that doesn't mean for us that the work is over. We've heard from Albertans that the tremendous growth in the condominium sector has raised consumer protection issues, and we're committed to addressing those. Manmeet Bhullar, our Minister for Service Alberta, will be consulting this year with Albertans that are involved in the market to ensure that our legislation reflects the changing dynamics of this important sector. Albertans who buy new homes deserve similar levels of protection, and that's why we passed the new Home Buyer Protection Act in the legislature this fall, requiring builders to provide home warranty coverage for most new homes that are built in Alberta. These new home warranty requirements are among the strongest in the country, and they balance affordable consumer protection and builder accountability. And now that the Act is passed, the next steps will be to complete the supporting regulations and to inform Albertans and industry about their options, and to implement the legislation by the fall of 2013. In addition to that, the next edition of the Alberta Building Code is under further development and will likely be drafted by the end of the year. And last fall, Service Alberta introduced standards and licensing for home inspectors to better protect Albertans that are buying resale homes. This regulation enforces strong consumer protection while still allowing for industry to operate in a competitive marketplace. Housing is critical. It's critical to our lives, and it's critical to our economy, to Albertans' hopes, to Albertans' dreams, and to our families' futures. So this government will always look to organizations like yours for expert advice to enable us to provide the right supports for this sector. For instance, our Minister of Municipal Affairs, Doug Griffiths, will be inviting your association to attend stakeholder meetings in February to discuss the Energy Code for buildings. The Energy Code for houses will also come up for discussion this year. But at heart, fundamentally, we only succeed if we work together in partnership. And we will continue to be consulting with you, both as representatives of your industry and as Albertans whose voices matter. Because this, our government, is your government, and your voices shape our agenda. And no matter how much our province changes, how many challenges we face in the years ahead, that one fact will remain the same. Thank you very much, and I wish you well for 2013.
Madam Premier, on behalf of all the Realtors here today and the Realtors Association of Edmonton, it's wonderful to hear that you value the relationship with Realtors, and I can certainly let you know that Realtors in this room, Realtors with the association, and Realtors right across Alberta certainly value that relationship as well, and we'll work together on building this province. Thank you very much. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Premier Redford. We're now going to take a coffee break brought to you by Real Estate Weekly. Make sure that you visit the booths at the back of the room. Don't forget to keep tweeting and check your emails and stuff like that. This is where you can log in if you have a tablet. We'll be back starting our program once again with Brad Ferguson of Economic Development Edmonton at 10:30 this morning. So 10:30, once again, we begin. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope that you're enjoying the coffee break sponsored by Real Estate Weekly. This is your 5-minute warning. We're going to be starting our program again in 5 minutes with Brad Ferguson from Edmonton Economic Development Corporation. So please refill your cups and we'll see you in 5 minutes. Welcome back. If I could get everybody to take their seats, our program is going to begin once again for the rest of the morning. Thank you very much. Once again, I hope you enjoy the coffee break sponsored by Real Estate Weekly. We missed one of our exhibitors at the back, so we want to thank Cutco for being here. Cutco is a new sponsor of ours, and we want to thank Cutco very much for being here. In case you heard the news, I guess the announcement was just made yesterday that to reach the medallion level this year for the Realtors Association, you need 46 sales. 46 to hit the medallion level. And it's kind of interesting when you look at some numbers. $7 billion in sales last year here in Edmonton through the multiple listing service, $7 billion in sales. There's roughly 7 billion people in the world. So $7 billion in sales, 7 billion people in the world. And if everybody in the room, I know everybody is not a realtor, but we do have a lot of realtors. We have 700 people in the room today. So if everybody was a realtor, if you want to imagine that, everybody would have to sell $100,000 to get to that $7 billion total, just the people in the room today. So I know we're only a week into 2013, but please get out there and work towards that $100,000. That's $7 billion in sales. Obviously, the economy is looking very good. We're getting some very positive reports this morning. And we're certainly buoyed by the news that we got from a number of people this morning. We're here for some other speakers this afternoon, or later this morning. They're going to have some other equally good things to say, I'm sure. First of all, I want to take a quick poll before we get back into our speakers. The Realtors Association offered realtors a chance for just $10 to bring guests. They certainly understand that if you bring great guests here that you're perhaps looking to sell a home to, or perhaps an investor, it certainly would help you as a realtor. This is really fundamental market knowledge that we think that all realtors should have. So it's really important that you bring guests here, and the Realtors Association has tried to certainly give you that opportunity by making an investment of $10. So just with a quick round of applause, how many realtors have bought a guest here this morning? How many realtors? Great, thank you. Not a lot, but thank you. Knowing this now, if we do the same thing next year, would you be interested in bringing a guest next year for that $10 fee? Once again. Okay, now people know more. Great. Wonderful. I think it's probably going to be a great idea, something that will grow with time, and your feedback is appreciated. I want to introduce our next guest. Our next guest is a man that I got to introduce myself to just a short period of time after he started his term. Brad Ferguson started as president and CEO of the Edmonton Economic Development Corporation on August 1st of last year. He's a U of A graduate. His private sector experience includes positions with Procter & Gamble and KPMG. As founder of Strategy Summit Limited, Brad was a lead consultant for major government policy initiatives, including Alberta's financial services strategy and the restructuring of the Alberta Innovate system. For the first time in our forecast, with a view of the national and provincial forces that influence the growth of Edmonton in the year ahead, I know you're going to love this guy. He has lots of great ideas, and he's going to do some great things for Edmonton. Ladies and gentlemen, Brad Ferguson. Welcome to the club. All right.
When I was 7 years old, I remember my father coming home to our 900 square foot home in St. Albert, telling my mother that he was going to leave his incredibly secure job as the CFO of Newmac Oil and Gas, and he wanted to start a real estate company. And my mother cried. We packed up all three kids and we moved to the Big Smoke, a place called Edmonton, where in 1976, we began one of the biggest economic and real estate booms in Canadian history, and everything was grand. My father, the accountant, took a risk that many never dreamed of and many never thought an accountant should ever take. But this was, and it is, Alberta, and it didn't matter if you were an accountant, a lawyer, a doctor, a school teacher, You had an entrepreneurial DNA in your blood, and it ran deep, and so did your love for real estate. But 5 years later, in 1981, as the National Energy Program took form and interest rates rocketed to 16% on Government of Canada bonds and 19-20% on real estate mortgages, I remember being in the back seat of our Ford LTD station wagon, one of those ones with the wood panels on the side, driving down River Valley Road, lying across the back seat, pretending to be asleep. And I remember the conversation in the front seat between my mother and my father. And my father said, "We're in for some extremely tough times. And frankly, I don't know how tough they're going to get. And we have to get rid of all expenses that aren't absolutely necessary. We simply can't afford them." And my mom, again with tears in her eyes, she asked, "Can I buy some clothes for the kids? They're starting school in September." And he looked at her and said, "Bunny, we simply can't afford it." Bust. Man, I was so scared. I just lied there. I pretended to be asleep. But we made it through those early 80s, and things got going pretty good again. So good, in fact, that my weekends were spent in the back of a brand new used 1982 Monte Carlo, the one with the little rectangle window at the back, and I was just tall enough I could peek out of it a little bit. And we drove around, all around Alberta, looking at developments and looking at properties potentially to buy. Things were good again. But I traveled around with a hard hat because occasionally we would stop at a construction site and check in on the progress being made. And I remember being in Calgary in the early 1990s. I was about 20, 21 years old, and Princeton was building a new office tower in downtown Calgary. Rents were $46 a square foot and increasing, and everyone was living high on the hog. You could do no wrong. The future of Alberta was absolutely fantastic. Then over the next 18 months, as we were approaching completion of construction, I watched leasing rates drop from $46 to $30 a square foot to $18 a square foot. At that point, our joint venture partner went bankrupt, leaving us holding the bag, and rents eventually plummeted to zero. And I watched my father start to give away office space in order to just recuperate operating costs. And I stood there with my hard hat in hand, really starting to understand the power of leverage and the cyclical nature of a commodity-based economy, and what happens when those two realities collide. After two economists this morning, I didn't want to come away with a whole lot of graphs. But what I will do, I'm going to talk a little bit about what the Premier didn't talk about, which is the inevitability of raising of taxes and some of the concerns that we have in the Edmonton economy. I'm going to start with a timeline because I want to continue my story and I want to continue to put it in perspective. I came out of university around 1990, and Edmonton was not the place to be. Don Getty had just lost his seat. Jan Reimer was mayor. Business was at a standstill. There were no new jobs. Most of my friends were moving to Vancouver or Toronto. The province was running a $3 billion deficit, $20 billion in debt, and the spirit of Edmonton was at an all-time low. This gentleman, Ralph Klein, came into power in 1992, and he made the hard choices that people living beyond their means had to eventually make. And he set out to slay the debt at all costs. And we've benefited from that tough decision and those tough decisions that were made then. It made us the Alberta we are today. Although we are still catching up on some infrastructure deficit, the tough work was starting, and this tough work had to be done. My organization, Economic Development Edmonton, started in 1993 under the leadership of Rick Lawlisher, which brought together 4 underperforming organizations, which was the Shaw Conference Center, Edmonton Tourism, Edmonton Research Park, and this thing we call economic development, which is what I want to give you a little perspective on as to what that is today. And we brought that into one organization thinking there would be synergies associated with them under all one management structure. And we're still working on that today. We've got a lot of work to do. Bill Smith became mayor in 1995, and he really focused on raising the morale of Edmontonians. We're the best city and the best province and the best country. Everybody remembers that mantra, and he was out there as the cheerleader, and we needed him. We needed to raise the self-esteem of Edmontonians again, and it worked. Coming off of that, Cal Nichols and company saved the Oilers. We might have to do that again. The internet was just becoming mainstream when our organization came out with this vision for 725, which was 7% of the GDP of Edmonton was to be in knowledge-based industries by the year 2025. It was a bold vision at that point in time. It was led by Vi Becker, who's now over at Stantec, but we're well on our way. Jim Edwards took over my position, or my current position, and he went through the boom again and the bust again of the internet revolution. And then Alan Scott, one of my true mentors, started a great number of initiatives at Edmonton Economic Development. He started with solved the labor dispute at the Shaw, fundamentally redefined the relationship with council and budget, did the deal on the Dell building in the research park, which at the time was a great deal. We were in the call center business. Started things like Venture Prize and Tech Edmonton and the research park again, and expanded out Hall D at the Shaw, did the deal on the World Trade Center. And he couldn't have done that without a great relationship with this guy, a guy named Stephen Mandel. And when the two work in sync, magic can happen. And when the two don't work well together, the city perils. Ed Stelmach came in a little bit later in 2006, and along with my predecessor, Ron Gilbertson. And if you recall at that time, it was boom time. Record unemployment, record migration coming into the city, record GDP growth, record labor shortages, record price of oil. The economy was so hot, in fact, that we made the conscious decision to get out of the economic development business and focus our attention on labor attraction and quality of life. And that's what we've done a lot of for the last 5 years. And it's worked. You heard this morning in terms of the attraction of labor to the community has helped stimulate and continue to build the economy. But right at that point in time, though, the commodity-based economy, which was just going strong, but we had way too much leverage in the system, and what happened? Well, Bear Stearns collapsed in 2008 in March, Lehman Brothers in September 2008, and literally over the weekend, the entire global economy came to a halt. Credit markets evaporated, ships were stranded in the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean because they couldn't dock, financial institutions declared bankruptcy over the weekend, and global trade pretty much came to a standstill. People potentially blame Mr. Stelmach for creating an unstable investment environment during that time, but there are so many things outside of our control. This boom, bust economy was starting to mitigate, and this was the first major bust we went through that wasn't necessarily commodity-driven. So Premier Stelmach resigned on January 26, 2010. My previous speaker, Alison Redford, became our premier in October 2010. 11? 10. With a new vision for a more progressive, compassionate Alberta. And when you map that history against the price of oil, which we do here, you'll see that our political leaders and our economic development leaders have all managed through very different times, very different terms in our history. And as we look forward over the next 5 to 10 years, with potentially a new mayor, what we know to be true is that we are extremely well positioned versus just about every other jurisdiction in the world, but we're entering a low-growth world where the word competition is going to be forever redefined. And we're living in a public policy environment that's focused on the irrelevant. If we look at this chart closely, over the past 5 years, when the price of oil went from $140 down to $40, Edmonton still had net positive migration, net positive employment gains. Our downturn was vastly outperformed any other jurisdiction, and our rebound has us leading not only the country, but just about all other regions in the Western world. Our boom-bust history is mellowing as we shift from exploration-based oil and gas environment to a manufacturing environment up in Fort McMurray, as well as the transportation, logistics, warehousing, financial services, education services, healthcare services, all other parts of our economy start to build and surround itself and start to build the essence of a resilient economy. It's a very different economy now, and we can't pretend to be asleep in the back seat. So whether it be RBC or TD or CIBC or BMO or National Bank, they all kind of say the same thing, which is they're expecting Alberta and Saskatchewan to outperform the rest of Canada, and Edmonton will be an economic and entrepreneurial powerhouse for the country, and one of the top 2 or 3 municipal markets in North America in terms of growth. Suddenly, we're a high-growth jurisdiction in a low-growth world, and that creates some really interesting dynamics that we're going to have to manage through on a local basis. What's driving the growth? Well, first, there's a massive global demand for commodities that we supply. There's a stable investment climate in which the world has an abundance of capital. We have a low-tax environment with extremely high-quality social programs, and we have a pretty open society that provides an abundance of opportunity for people to come here and build their lives. And if those 4 things weren't enough, we've got a democratic government, stability of government relations, we have a property rights system in place, compared to many places in the world that don't. We have independence of our judicial system, the ability to repatriate capital into other jurisdictions. We have a very sound banking system. Our credit rating is still strong and outperforms anybody else, and very much an openness of the culture. $56 billion in GDP, growing at a rate of about 3.4 this morning, 3.5%. We're over $50,000 GDP per capita. That's also growing at a faster rate than anywhere else in the country. Unemployment at 4.3. Heard this morning it might go under 4. Can't imagine that happening. No sales tax, overall lowest tax by a huge margin. Population growing at about 22,000 people a year, which means we're putting in a city of Red Deer every 4 years into this city. We have a labor shortage of about 114,000 projected over the next 10 years on capital expenditures in Fort McMurray and in the northern Alberta, really Lacombe North, of about $220 billion over the next 10 years. We have a significant opportunity if we're not asleep in the back seat. So for our organization, what we focus on is our objective. So we want to make sure Edmonton and the capital region will outperform every regional jurisdiction in North America consistently over the next 20 years, regardless if the price of oil is $140 or $40. And that last little bit on that statement is really important. And we're going to measure that in terms of GDP growth per capita and their standard of living. Those 2 pieces come together that really attract people to this community. Now, as the head of the local economic development authority, I traditionally would stop there and present a series of upward-looking graphs again that make everything look really rosy, and certainly I could do that. But you saw a lot of that this morning, and I think it's more valuable that I provide some insights into some dark clouds looming that have the potential to throw some of those forecasts off, some of those forecasts that we've been hearing and reading about in the news. From my perspective, there are 6 categories that I would like to talk about. And it goes beyond just oil and gas. First, globally, we have negative growth in Europe. We have a U.S. recovery that will continue to stagnate. We will continue to kick the can down the road. We will not solve the problem. We will issue more debt. We will increase our ceiling, and we won't deal with it. We have growth in China that isn't double-digit growth anymore, and nor will it return to double-digit growth as that economy starts to mature. And all mature economies have to start investing in social programs and infrastructure. And we're into single-digit growth in China. We also have what you have is a fundamental shift in where growth is happening in the world, and this community here isn't necessarily connected with it. The second is nationally. We have an escalating loonie, which was once our competitive advantage based on laziness. We have the rise of a social agenda going on across the country, which costs a vast amount of money, entitlements. We have provincial debts reaching their tipping points, resulting in an east-west envy that will jade our national public policy environment in favor of central Canada at the expense of the golden goose. The attention is focused back to central Canada. Provincially, we have an escalating cost structure that's unsustainable. We have a revenue model that provides no certainty. And any time that you have a escalating cost structure with variable revenue, you're going to get caught offside. And if you get caught offside multiple years in a row, as we have today, multiple deficits turn into a big debt, which will lead to increased interest rates and eventually has to be offset with higher taxes, period. So that's the global, national, and provincial level. At the industry level, we have much more supply of oil and gas than ever expected to be coming onto the market at this point in time. As well, we have a reduction in demand forecast. We used to think U.S. demand would go at a straight line. It's not. Oil intensity used in China used to be monitored at a straight line. It's not. The application of new technology, the opportunity to find new resources, makes our old models obsolete as different countries become more efficient. And we continue to be a landlocked province with fixed pipeline capacity, higher cost of labor, all of which will lead to a deceleration of capital expenditures, that $220 billion that we talked about earlier. And that's the discussion, that's the conversation going on in the boardrooms at Suncor and Syncrude and CNRL and Husky and these big boys up in Fort McMurray. At the firm level, we've got a lineup at my door of organizations setting up shop in Edmonton right now. They all want to come and compete for that small share of global growth that's available, because it's available here. And they're hungry. They're much hungrier than the typical Alberta company that works hard enough Monday to Thursday so Friday they can go at the cottage. That's a reality. Our aging business owners are more risk adverse. They're not investing in research, innovation, technology, machinery, equipment. And they're not investing those things that are going to keep them more productive in an increasing competitive world. And that's a challenge. At a personal level, we have an aging workforce as well as an increasingly immigrant and Aboriginal workforce, which is on one side, and we have an aging workforce on the other side. And in between, we have a workforce that has a lot of entitlement culture built into it, massive personal debt loads that are singing, "What have you done for me lately?" as opposed to who's coming into the market, which is, "I need this job, I want this job because I need to feed my family." And it creates an environment where growth rates of wages and salaries are beginning to decline. Not the absolute salary, but the growth rate in salaries. So again, these projections, these straight line growth projections that we've been using start to get called into question. So what does it mean for me, or what does it mean for you? Whoops, wrong button. Well, I'd suggest that over the next 5 to 10 years, which is my parameters, I operate in 5 to 10 year cycles. I don't have to just tell you what's going on next year. That's the prognosticators. I'm not a prognosticator, but 5 to 10 year cycles. We have much more economic volatility, but we're based here in Alberta on some very sound fundamentals, which is what we have, the world wants and the world needs. And we have a government environment right now and a debt environment that allows us to make sure we have a very strong balance sheet. The second thing, though, is we're going to see a slightly slower growth in population. The rampage we've been on lately, and our organization's been a big part of that, is not sustainable at the current rate. It's got to come off. We have more competition for labor in Saskatchewan, on the East Coast, in North Dakota, different parts of BC, different parts of Alberta that now can fly over us. They don't have to go through us. And our challenge to attract labor is going to question that straight line growth that we've been talking about. We have our first-time home buyers. A lot of that 22,000 people a year are immigrants, Aboriginal. They're young couples coming up from the U.S. They're young single people coming in from the U.S. military. And as a result, from a housing point of view, we start to find clusters, people that want to live with like-minded people. It's changing the environment of Edmonton quite significantly. It creates a development trend that's going to continue on for the next 15 to 20 years. What's interesting about these groups as well, though, is they've got a very low credit score. A lot of people are moving here because of opportunity, which is wonderful. But they come with tough credit scores. They're leaving their houses behind. They're leaving jobs behind. And as a result, we're seeing a shift. We're seeing it in the U.S. right now. We're starting to see it in emerging Canada, where it's not people buying first-time homes, but they're looking for rental units because they can't qualify for mortgages. And we have banks that are still pretty tight in their lending criteria. And the combination of those things create some interesting impacts on our rental environment here versus our first-time homeowners. We also looked at some graphs this morning where the ages of people getting married and having kids and moving into places starts to move up and gets older. And as a result, that first-time home buyer is changing significantly. What it does do is create some opportunities for singles and for our downtown density. We have about between 12,500 and 13,000 units people living in the downtown core, and we're expecting that to double in the next 7 years. Talked about a little bit about interest rates, the inevitable rise of interest rates. Angus talked about that this morning more eloquently than I can, and that eventually leads to taxes. It's the only way to pay for it. You can't necessarily grow your way out of it when the entire world isn't in a growth environment. And as a result, in 2013 is going to be the year of the balance sheet. Angus talked about it, about having staying power, and I'd suggest that on a personal and on a professional level, it's all about strengthening your balance sheet right now. It's not about getting all giddy about growth. It's about strengthening your balance sheet, and that will allow you to survive in the downtime and take advantage of opportunities in the uptime that are going to come. But we have work to do on our balance sheets. Our organization's focused on 6 critical priorities. A big part is marketing the city of Edmonton, internally and externally. That's new. We've never had that responsibility, and we're going to be moving in a very aggressive direction on that. We've got labor and continued labor, but more importantly, investment attraction coming into the area. We're going to be working with firms on market diversification and market access. Big push of ours is on entrepreneurship and innovation, which leads to the competitiveness and the productivity. And we're going to take a much more active role in policy and advocacy. And the reason is we have to, because we're asleep in the back seat sometimes. So to conclude, I'm going to talk about, I have one personal story that I'll chat about. And I was running Doug Horner's leadership campaign, and I sat down with one of the great Albertans of all time. And he leaned in and said, Brad, the United States had a master plan where first, they built up their military, and their Navy controlled the flow of goods across the Pacific and the Atlantic. That allowed them to use their financial strength to loan money to other countries. That allowed them to guarantee air rights into foreign countries to protect the interests of American companies. That was their master plan. He said Alberta had his master plan as well, but we're dangerously close on taking our eye off the ball. So I logically asked what it was. And he said, first, we need to build a policy environment that spawns entrepreneurs and creates an entrepreneurial spirit. Because entrepreneurs are self-reliant. They're less reliant on government. They can provide for themselves and their families in a much greater way than those in different roles. That allows for a small, smart, stable government to emerge and succeed here in Alberta. And if we have small, smart, stable government, we can create a low-tax environment. And we've done this to date. Started in 1992, a combination of what we did federally and what we did provincially. And we've got a structural tax advantage versus just about any other jurisdiction in North America. And it's a big gap. What that does is it allows us to very aggressively turn our attention to attracting people, investment, businesses, families, teams, and dollars into this community. And that's our opportunity that we have right now. The world is down. And I came from an environment at Procter & Gamble when they said, when the going gets tough, the tough acquire market share. And now's our time. And that's the conversation we should be talking about. But we're talking about MLA pay, drunk driving legislation. All those things are important, but they're immaterial in the accounting world compared to the big picture of what we should be talking about. And that gives us a competitive advantage, and a long-term structural competitive advantage. So I've spent many years trying to justify why we live here to people, especially when it's minus 27 going on tomorrow. You have too. We all have. And I feel strongly impressed that instead of justifying, we need to really understand what unites us. And I would suggest everybody in this room, whether it's you who came here, or your parents, or your grandparents, they came here in search of opportunity. They came here in search of something, and we all choose to stay here because we're all building something. And with all the opportunity in front of us and the winds at our back, we need to issue an invitation to the world, and we call it to come build it here, whatever your it is. Could be your career, could be your business, could be your family, could be your life. Whatever your opportunity is, come build it here. Thanks very much. Look forward to working with you all.
Thank you, Brad. Thanks for the pep talk.
That's good.
We were having fun till you got here.
Hard dose of reality.
Ladies and gentlemen, Brad Ferguson. Brad, I think on behalf of everybody, we certainly appreciate your very poignant comments and great food for thought. Thank you very much. Wow, I knew you'd like the guy. Our next guest has some pretty big shoes to fill. For a number of years, Richard Gocher, who many of you know, did the forecast here when he was with CMHC. Richard has moved on to the life of a semi-retired consultant, although he's probably busier than ever. And certainly the Realtors Association have enlisted Richard and some of his services, and Richard now provides a quarterly economic forecast that you can get from ereb.com. It can be downloaded there. David Lan is Richard's replacement. David's been with CMHC since 2006. Previously, he was involved as the senior economist for Southwestern Ontario. He's held jobs for CMHC in Toronto and in Montreal, and he's making his first forecast here for our conference. Ladies and gentlemen, David Lam at CMHC.
Okay, so thank you for having me here. Again, my name is David Lan. I'm a senior marketing analyst with Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation. So today, I'm going to talk about the housing market in the Edmonton CMA. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an overview of what happened in 2012, and then we're going to talk about what we can expect in 2013. So here's the presentation outline of the day. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the various housing drivers that's important to housing demand. We're going to look at employment, which is the single most important housing drivers. We're going to look at migration as well. And then we're going to look at the mortgage rate movement in 2013. And some of that is going to be overlapping with John's presentation. So I'm going to go pretty quickly in this section. And then we're going to move on to existing home market in Alberta. Daryl is going to talk about the resale market in Edmonton. So I'm just going to touch on some trends in Alberta, specifically in terms of demand, supply, and price movement. And then I'm going to move on to the new home market in Edmonton. We're going to look at a single detached home price, singles detached home starts and price. And then we're going to also talk about the multiple family starts in Edmonton as well. And then we're going to talk about the rental market. We're going to touch on vacancy rates as well as the rents. And then we'll wrap up with a outlook summary. So, here's a presentation summary. I always like to start off a presentation with a summary so that when I hit the slides, you will understand it better. So in terms of employment in Edmonton, employment will continue to grow, and it's just that in 2013, we're going to see a little bit of a slower growth. And then in terms of migration, migrants will continue to move in Edmonton. A lot of them are here for basically for the job market, the job opportunities that we offer here in Edmonton. And then in terms of resale market across Alberta, sales has been going up, whereas listings has been trending down. So that means most of the market in Alberta has entered balanced market territory, and we're seeing price growth during the past few quarters, and that will continue into 2013. Now, in terms of single detached home starts, due to the fact that we still have quite a bit of choices in the resale market, so that's going to have an impact on single detached home prices as well, single detached home starts as well. Now, in terms of multifamily home construction, we're seeing quite a bit of activities in apartment starts, and that's actually what's driving multifamily home construction right now. And then in terms of the rental markets, we are seeing low vacancy rate as a result of demand from the from migrants, and that actually results in higher rents and, of course, more rental starts. So let's move on to the actual presentation. So we're going to talk about Edmonton's economy. So in terms of economy, in terms of housing drivers, the first driver is employment. And as I mentioned before, employment is the single most important housing driver, because if you don't have a job, you may not get qualified for a mortgage. So this chart shows employment since 2003, and as you can see, right now employment is actually at record levels. Employment actually took a little bit pause in 2010, started growing around 2011, and that growth continued to 2012. And right now, we're looking at about north of 700,000 in terms of job levels, which is a lot higher than what we've seen back in the previous peak in 2008, 2009. At the time, it was 650. So we created quite a bit of job here, and that actually has contributed and will contribute to housing demand in an Edmonton CMA. So what kind of jobs were actually created in Edmonton in 2012 then? Well, it was actually part-time job that was driving the total employment. Now, this is a little bit less desirable because it's actually full-time job that actually motivates people to become homeowners. Part-time gives them means, but full-time actually gives people the willingness or the confidence to become homeowners. Now, this chart shows full-time and part-time employment on a growth basis since 2003. As you can see, between 2010 and 2011, the blue line here which shows full-time employment was growing really fast, and that actually contributed to the housing demand. Of course, an increase in starts, single detached home starts between 2011 and 2012. And as we move into 2012, we start to see full-time employment start to slow, whereas part-time employment start to pick up, and contributing to higher employment. But that will have an impact on housing demand, because as I mentioned before, it gives you the part-time employment gives the means, but not exactly the confidence to become homeowners. That's why we're expecting a little bit of slower growth in housing demand. We're going to talk about that later on. Oops. So, in 2012, growth actually reached almost 4% in 2012. This is one of the, well, I mean, the chart shows a little bit different because the data has just came out, so I haven't really had the time to update the data. So what I'm going to do is that if I have the actual number, I will talk about the actual number. If I don't, I'll just refer to our forecast for 2012. So in 2012, growth actually reached almost 4%, but in 2013, the employment growth is expected to moderate to about to not 2% like what we've seen on this chart. We're expecting the growth to slow down a little bit, but certainly between 2 to 4%, north of 2% for sure. Now, and the level itself will continue to be good because we're growing off a record high, so that will also continue to provide people with the means and the confidence that they need to become homeowners. So with positive employment growth, unemployment in Edmonton actually went down. Just like John just said, we're actually now about 4.3% right now, which is a lot lower than the national average of 7%. And that's actually making Edmonton one of the strongest labor markets in Canada. And because of the tight labor market, we're actually attracting a lot of migrants. Especially from Quebec, from Atlantic provinces, from British Columbia, as well as from Ontario, where job condition is not that great. And we're certainly seeing a lot of international migrants moving to Edmonton as well because of the job opportunity that Edmonton provides over here. Now, migrants are actually very good for housing demand because they tend to rent first and then move into homeownership later. So they tend to actually benefit the rental market first and then homeownership, either it's new homes or resale homes later on once they feel that their jobs are actually very secure. Now, this chart shows net migration since 2003. As we can see in 2012, we're expecting net migration to be almost as high as the booming years between 2005 and 2008, 2009. But as we move into 2013, we're expecting a little bit of slowdown as a result of slower employment growth, but it's going to continue to be higher than what we've seen between 2010 and 2011. Excuse me. So now, in terms of five-year mortgage rate, rates will remain near historical low throughout 2013. And that's due to the fact that the economy is still fragile, so Bank of Canada is not in a hurry to raise rates. And if they actually raise the rates, Canadian dollar will actually gain in value against US dollar, and that will hurt Canada's exporting sector. Now, the posted rate right now is it's hovering around 5%, and it will remain around that level in 2013 as well, and that will continue to provide a boost in housing demand, and certainly more to the first-time buyers than the second-time buyers. So let's move on to Alberta's resale market. So in terms of resale market, we're going to talk about demand, supply, and price movement. And in terms of demand, we use the MLS sales as a proxy for demand. And as you can see from this chart, sales have been on the rise since 2010. And that's due to the fact that we've seen a strong employment across Alberta, and that actually gives people the means and the confidence to become homeowners. And of course, low mortgage rates helped quite a bit as well. And in 2012, sales is actually expected to grow by about 12% from the level in 2011. But as we move into 2011, the growth will slow a little bit, but it will continue to be positive, and that's a result of a slower employment growth. But the sales itself will continue to be positive. Now, in terms of supply, on the supply side, we use the new listings as a proxy for supply, and you can see from this chart, sales has been on a downward trend since 2010. And that's due to the fact that during the past few years, most of Alberta's resale market has been in buyers market, so that actually that didn't provide the price growth that we need to induce more people to post their to list their homes onto markets for sale. I mean, there wasn't exactly that much equity to be made, so we weren't exactly seeing too many people interested in selling their homes. So, with sales increasing and listings decreasing, the resale market in Alberta actually moved into balanced market territory in 2012. So how can we tell? Well, we use something called sales to new listing ratio, which is basically an interaction between demand and supply. So when sales to new listing ratio is between around 45% to 65%, balanced market conditions tend to occur, which means that there are enough demand to meet with supply. So price tend to grow positively, usually about the same rate of as the inflation. And that's exactly what happened in 2012 across Alberta. We saw we saw about 2 to 3% growth in the resale market in terms of prices. But during the past few years, especially around 2010, 2011, as well as during the recessionary years between 2008 and 2009, the market, the sales to new listing ratio was below 45%. So that was characterized as a buyer's market. That's why we didn't see too much of a price growth. And in some cases, price actually declined as well. But looking forward in 2012 and 2013, we're expecting balanced market to continue in most of the markets in Alberta. So price is expected to rise by another 2 to 3% in 2013. Oops, sorry. So let's move on to Edmonton's new single detached home market. So in terms of starts, this chart shows single detached home starts since 2004. As you can see, start has been trending up since 2011, and that's due to the fact that we're seeing strong full-time employment between 2011 and 2012, and of course, the low mortgage rate helped as well. So where are the popular places for single detached home? Well, this chart shows single starts by area. As you can see, we're certainly seeing quite a bit of activities in southwest area as well as in the Millwood area. And West Jasper Place and Castle Downs are another two places that's very popular with single detached home starts. Whereas in the downtown core area kind of thing, we're certainly not seeing too much of activity over there, and that's due to the fact that they don't really have land over there. So moving forward, well, in 2012, with positive demand, total single detached actually reached about 5,600 units in 2012. And looking forward in 2013, we're expecting a little bit of a slowdown. I mean, not too much. We're talking about 100 units down from what we see in 2012. We can almost characterize as stable. So why the slight slowdown or stability though? Well, there are three reasons behind this. The first one is actually competition from the resale markets. Right now, we have quite a bit of choice in the resale market, so people who are actually interested in buying may actually find what they like in the resale markets. So that's going to impact the single starts in 2013. And also, because we have quite a bit of a start during the past few quarters, units under singles that's actually under construction right now are actually rising. And that will limit builders' ability to launch new projects in 2013. Now, this chart shows units under construction since 2003. As you can see, units under construction has been on an upward trend since 2011. And because they are actually under construction, a lot of resources, a lot of builders actually have their resources tied to these projects. And because of the competition from the resale markets, we're expecting higher levels of inventory in 2013. Now this chart shows single detached home inventory since 2003. And as you can see, during the past few months, the inventory has been on an upward trend, and we're expecting that trend to continue into 2013. And builders will actually have to sell them off before they can start more. So let's talk about the new home prices. Now, prices actually have remained relatively stable since 2011. Now, this chart shows average and median new home prices since 2005. And as you can see, average prices have been hovering around 500,000 level, whereas the median prices have been just hovering around 450. They don't seem to be going anywhere. So why the stability? Well, the major reason behind this, the major reason behind this is because the input costs, we're talking about labor and the land costs, hasn't changed much since 2010. Now this chart shows a new house price index, which measures input costs as well. And as you can see, it's been basically flat since 2010. So it doesn't seem to be providing any boost in house prices. And another reason is because there's no competition effect supporting, or there's little compositional effect supporting price changes. By compositional effect, we mean that the average price may be, or is actually influenced by the type of homes sold or absorbed. So now, if we have more upper-end homes getting absorbed, then the average price tend to grow faster. If we have more lower-end homes getting absorbed, then the average price may actually drop. And this chart shows the share of absorbed singles by price range. And as you can see, is actually mid-end, or the only category that actually has experienced a significant increase is actually the mid-end. Those absorbed between 450 and 550. So that's why we're not seeing too much of a price growth in Edmonton. Whereas in Calgary is actually they had a lot of homes absorbed, new homes absorbed above 650. That's why we're seeing a little bit of price growth over there in Calgary. So in 2012, price actually have grown a little bit less than 2% as a result of no change in input cost and no compositional effect. But as we move into 2013, it's going to be about the same situation. We're not expecting price to grow more than 2%. In fact, it's going to be between 1% and 2%. Now, this chart shows the average price since 2004, and as you can see, price will continue to be relatively stable, and it will continue to be below the 2009 peak. Excuse me. Okay, so let's move on to Edmonton's new multi-family market. So, in terms of new multi-family markets, now there is a lot of activities. This chart shows multi-family starts on a seasonally adjusted basis at annual rate since 2004. As you can see, it's quite self-explanatory. We actually have surpassed the last peak in 2007. So what's actually driving these starts? Well, in fact, apartment is actually driving starts, but all are actually trending higher. Now, this chart shows multifamily starts by type since 2004. And as you can see, the apartment have been growing a lot faster than raw or semi-detached home starts. So indeed, it was apartment that's what's driving multifamily home starts. So where are the most popular areas for apartments, though? Now this chart shows apartment starts by area, and you can see that again we do see quite a bit of activity in southwest region, the southwest area zone, as well as in the Mill Woods area. But we're also seeing a lot of activities in downtown core area as well. Now in downtown, we tend to see more of the high-rise type of building, whereas in Millwood in Southwest, we tend to see more of the low-rise or 5-story high apartments are being built over there. Whereas the areas that's popular with single detached home, we tend to see less of the apartment starts. So with strong growth in apartment starts, multifamily home construction in 2012 is actually on par. It's almost on par with the 2007 level. I have I'm going to talk about that, the actual numbers later on. Now in 2013, however, multifamily starts will pull back a little bit. We're talking about 30% decrease from the level in 2012. Why is that? Well, the major reason behind this is because units under construction are actually rising. We had quite a bit of activity during the past few quarters, so units under construction has been on an upward trend, and that again will limit builders' ability to launch new projects in 2013 because their resources is tied to the existing project. Now this chart shows units under construction since 2004. As you can see, the units under construction have been on the rise since 2010-2011. And another reason, again, just like in the single detached home starts, because of competition from the resale markets, inventory will rise in 2013, and the builders will actually have to sell off inventories before they can start new. Now, right now, the multifamily inventory has been on a downward trend, but as we move into 2013, we should be seeing the trend to reverse and going upward. So that's it for multifamily home starts. Let's move on to rental market. We're going to talk about the vacancy rate and rents. So in terms of vacancies, this chart shows apartment vacancy rate since 2003. As you can see, vacancy rate has been on a downward trend since 2009. And according to our latest survey results, vacancy rate in 2012 actually went down to 1.7% from the 3.some% in 2011. And in 2013, we should be expecting the relatively low vacancy rate to continue into 2013. So why is that? Well, the answer is actually quite simple. Demand, we have a lot of demand right now and not exactly enough supply to meet that demand. Let's talk about demand first. Right now, as I mentioned before, we're having a lot of migrants moving to this area for jobs, and the first home they tend to choose is actually rental. So that's why we're seeing a lot of demand from migrants. And another reason is because for those who are actually in rental, we're not expecting. Excuse me. For those who are actually in rentals, we're not expecting them to move out to home ownership in mass. And that's due to the fact that the cost of owning and renting are actually pretty stable compared to what we've seen during the past few years. Now this chart shows Edmonton's carrying costs versus two-bedroom rent. By carrying costs, we mean that we actually calculated based on the assumption of 5% down payment, 5-year fixed mortgage rate, as well as 25-year amortization period. As you can see, both in 2012 and 2013, both carrying costs and two-bedroom rent has been on the increase, but certainly it's not something. It's not a big swing like what we've seen back in 2004, between 2004 and 2007, where both prices and mortgage rate were increasing, resulting in higher carrying costs, and that actually got lots of renters moving into home ownership because they didn't want. They were trying to not pay more than they could back then. So that's why back then we did see quite a bit of people moving into home ownership at the time. But in 2012 and 2013, we're certainly not going to see that kind of a situation. Now, in terms of supply, In terms of supply, we use the rental universe as a proxy for supply, and supply has been decreasing since 2006. This chart shows rental universe since 2003. As you can see, in 2006, we had about 66,000 units in terms of rental stock. Now we're down to 58,000 units. So why did the supply move down? Well, the major reason behind that is because many apartments have been converted into condos, but they weren't actually enough start to replenish the stock. Now, this chart shows conversion and rental starts since 2003. As you can see, condo conversions basically outpace rental starts in most of years. And the spike in 2007 is certainly hard to miss. At the time, back then, we have almost 2,500 units converted into condos. So with demand outpacing supply, the average rent has increased. Based on our survey results, in 2012, we had the average rent is for a two-bedroom apartment is about $1,070 per month. Back in 2011, we had the average rent was about $1,030. In 2013, we're expecting the average rent to move up again to about $1,100 level. And because of the strong demand and, of course, rising rents, builders actually have started more rental projects in 2012. Now, this chart shows rental housing starts since 2004. As you can see, in 2012, we had, more than 1,800 rental units started, which is a lot higher than what we've seen back in 2011 or in 2004. And because of a strong demand and rising rents as well, we are seeing more condos offered as rentals. Now, this chart shows condo universe since 2006, the year that we started what was that thing called surveying or collecting data on rental condos. Back then, it was about 4,000 units in Edmonton. Now it's up to almost 12,000 or more than 12,000 units condos offered for rent. So let's wrap up. So in 2012, in terms of employment growth, we had about almost 4% growth in terms of employment growth. In 2013, we should be seeing a little bit of slowdown, but certainly going to be north of 2%, but south of 4%. In terms of the single detached home market, just based on the number just came in today, we're at 5,658 units, and in 2013 we should be expecting a slight slowdown in starts. Now, in terms of multifamily starts, in 2012 we had 7,179 units started in 2012. Which is almost as high as what we've seen back in 2007, I believe. Yeah. And then in 2013, we're expecting the level to slow down. And then in terms of the rental market, vacancy is registered at 1.7% based on our latest survey. In 2013, we should be expecting low vacancies to persist as well. And then in terms of the rent, we'll continue to see rent continue to move up. So thank you very much again, and I'll be hanging around. So if you have any question, feel free to come over and talk to me. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
David, thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation and another optimistic outlook. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's great to see so many of the veterans in the room. Talked briefly this morning with Wayne Moen, president of the Canadian Real Estate Association, of course, longtime Edmonton realtor. Graham Downey, we got a chance to chat briefly this morning at about 7:30. Bill Briggs. Bill Bill and I go back a long way as well. Bill from the Home Builders Association, a past president there too. And it's wonderful to see so many of the, and I won't call you old-timers, but so many of the old-timers are still with us and doing things. Matter of fact, I was talking to Bill about one of the first brokerages that he got into, and he's telling me the story about they had this young broker, real estate agent, who was a real go-getter, and so they had a brand new office, nice furniture, and he saw his first customer coming up as they open their office on the first day of business. So he goes and he picks up the phone and he starts making all these deals and talking big numbers and, yeah, I want you to get it down. I want to buy those 5 properties and do this. Guy comes in the door, make sure it happens because I'm the best real estate agent in Edmonton. And he hangs up the phone. He goes out there and introduces himself. Hello, sir, nice to meet you. I'm Edmonton's best realtor. What can I help you with? He said, sir, it's nice to meet you. I'm from TELUS. I'm here to fix your phone and activate it so it works. That wasn't Bill. That was somebody else. You know, a lot of us have been looking forward to this event for weeks and maybe even a little bit longer than that. I know that people like John Hall and many others have been working on it for months here with the Realtors Association. But the next person who's going to speak and wrap up our program today is somebody who probably has been dreading it. Imagine, put yourself in the shoes of saying the first day on your job, like official day on the job, you're going to speak to a packed room at the Expo Center of 700 people, and you're going to face the media before and after you speak. That's the position that our new president, Daryl Cook, is in. As I say, I had a chance to have lunch with Daryl just before Christmas. I think he's going to do an outstanding job. Let me tell you a little bit about Daryl. He left his job as a senior manager with a national soft drink company in 1994 to become a realtor. He spent several years around the Realtors Association. He spent 6 years as one of the governors on the Realtors Foundation. He's won awards, and to this day serves on a number of committees. He was on the marketing committee, the tech committee, the standards committee, the nominations committee. So he served on a number of committees for the Realtors over the years, and this is the sort of person who spends so much time not just helping out himself, but certainly helping out his industry as well. He joined the board of directors 2 years ago. He was president-elect last year, and now making his first speech as the president of the Realtors Association of Edmonton. Ladies and gentlemen, Daryl Cook.
Good morning, and thank you for sticking around. I know we're a little bit behind schedule here, but I can assure you that I will wrap this up in exactly 18 minutes. For the past year, we've been saying that realtors are here when life happens. And life is certainly happening here this morning with so many realtors and friends in the audience. Excuse me. Here when life happens is a realistic theme because life happens to all of us. The decisions we make in life will impact us throughout our future. When purchasing a home, buyers may be excited at the time, but in most cases they are making the purchase because of something that is happening in their life. It may be two people bringing their lives together or separating. It may be an addition to a family or an unfortunate loss. Perhaps it's a graduation or a new job that prompts them to buy or sell real estate. No matter what the reason, a realtor will always be here when life happens. I want to recognize our current board of directors. Please give them a round of applause when I'm finished. We have our past president, Doug Singleton, our president-elect, Greg Steele, vice president, Geneva Tetrault, directors Mike Yurchuk, Rob Freely, Pat Laviniak, Sheldon Johnston, and Steve Sedgwick. Now let's take a look at our last year in the local real estate marketplace. Then we'll focus on the year ahead. And I'm optimistic about a great year with plenty of promise and opportunity. We've heard from 5 of our leaders in the community who have outlined their thoughts on the economy, construction industry, and consumer confidence. And I can't think of any reason to doubt them if 2013 mirrors the past year. Here's a look at the past 3 years' residential sales. You can see that this market is stable, steady, and predictable. Residential sales were higher in the first part of the year and then slowed slightly to simply match the previous 2 years. Listings were a little more erratic at the beginning of the year, but smoothed out to match the norm by year's end. If we break out residential sales, excuse me, it is very dry up here. If we break out residential sales, we can see how single-family and condo sales excuse me, varied throughout the 3-year period, 2010 through 2012. It's almost a perfect picture of stable, balanced, and there's no bubble evident in these numbers. Excuse me. One thing I think we should monitor is the ratio of single-family to condo sales. There's a move throughout the city to population intensification. Very few rental properties being built, but condo construction is booming downtown and in the newer areas. Realtors may not be handling this property for a few years, as much of the construction is sold directly by the builder or the developer. But as the property is transferred, we'll be seeing more and more of this property coming through our MLS system. This graph shows the percentage of total sales in Edmonton that are condos as related to single-family home over the past few years. Note that in Toronto, condo sales are about 50% of the market, so we've got a way to go. And what about the residential prices? The all-residential average price tracked higher than the previous 2 years for most of this year. For most of last year. Prices started the year at $316,000, peaked in May at $348,000, and then settled back down to end the year at $333,000. The average price for single-family and condos was consistent with the previous 2 years, but still quite a bit lower than the inflated prices that we saw in 2006 and 2007. Single-family homes ended the year at $391,000 and peaked at $393,000. Condo prices rose excuse me, from $226,000 to a high of $248,000 to end off at $225,000. We are often asked if the Edmonton market is being driven by investors. With the number of people moving here, there's steady demand for housing by people who intend to live in the property they buy, and this demand is shoring up prices and keeping the investors at bay. Our figures show that an investor would have to put down 60% of the purchase price to break even, using the average figures of $965 for rent, a $236,000 mortgage, and a 4% interest rate on a mortgage. Let's explore an investment scenario. If an investor can get an average rent of $965, put down 20% on a 25-year amortization at 3.91%, and has to pay $250 for condo fees and utilities, which is low, but we'll use that for this figure. His break-even purchase price would be $185. Excuse me, boy. With a mortgage of $148,000. The average purchase price of a condo last year was $236,000, which puts over half the available condos out of his range. Here's a chart that shows the downtown condos that are less than 10 years old. Note that even the lowest prices paid in 2012 are well above the average market price for condos. And in the newest towers just being built, the rents will be well above average also. But investors need not despair. Here are 10 properties in Oliver that all had selling prices below the market average. However, investors will have to work the numbers carefully to ensure they maintain a positive cash flow. The profit is going to be in long-term value appreciation than a generous positive cash flow. We'll look at some observations to this scenario. Many first-time buyers who cannot afford a first-time family home are drawn to the condo market, but they prefer to buy new rather than a resale property. There are perhaps three conclusions from this exercise. Firstly, This market is being driven by home buyers rather than investors. Second, investors need to push rents up in condo properties to increase their cash flow. And third, investors with older properties will need to invest in upgrades to compete with new construction. There are a number of indicators that evaluate the level of market activity. The first is the average days on market. And this chart shows the average days for the past 3 years, now 2012 being the green line. You'll notice that for the first 3 quarters of 2012, days on market was lower than the previous year. Then it matched the previous year as the market slowed down, and this is an indicator of a steady market. Days on market is a seller statistic. Sellers want to know how long that property will be on the market. In turn, the buyer's stat is the inventory level, as they want the greatest selection of properties matching their criteria. Here are the 2012 inventory levels as compared to the previous 2 years. Inventory was down about 18% from the previous year and 24% lower than 2010. In many situations, the total inventory figure may be irrelevant if there are shortages of particular types of properties or specific price ranges or locations. We expect that this low inventory level will persist into the second quarter, but increasing prices will encourage new listings, which will build the inventory through the second half of the year. And I know I had an interview this morning with one of the TV stations, and I said the exact thing, that in some price ranges right now, the inventory is a bit low. And I said it was around in between that $300,000 and $400,000 mark, where some areas we are finding it a bit tight. Finally, we want to know how sales relate to listings. The sales to listing ratio shows how both market activity indicators together. When the number is higher, we can assume that sales are up relative to listing activity. This will put downward pressure on available inventory. In 2012, the sales to listing ratio was higher than the previous 2 years, suggesting there were more buyers than sellers. With the available inventory of 4,300 approximately at the end of the year, this is equal to about a 4.5-month supply. I don't see any reason to panic, but the supply is tightening. We often hear reports in national press reporting that the average housing price in Canada is going up or down. The national number is often irrelevant in Edmonton because it's heavily influenced by sales in Vancouver and in Toronto. All real estate is local, and we can see from this chart that prices in Edmonton are relatively low compared to other markets in Canada. We fall into 7th place, and the average of all residential price is below the national average. With the average price in Edmonton, this is what you can buy. 3-bedroom, 1.5-bath family home with a double garage, backing onto a park, needs nothing. Beautiful refinished interior, fully finished basement with a separate laundry area and a fireplace. Now here's a fabulous home for $350,000 in West Vancouver. The realtor optimistically reports that the home has many upgrades, and although far from complete, it's perfect for the right builder or someone who wants to finish it to their liking. And in Toronto, you can pick up this cute-as-a-button 1-bedroom bungalow in Danforth on a 16-foot lot for just $329,000. It's air-conditioned and has new vinyl siding. Here are the prices for 8 areas in the city. And you can see that the average price varies from area to area. The average December price rose in each area, except Central, as compared to last December, with the highest increases being in the Southwest and the Northeast. Note that these prices are for 1 month only and may not be relevant from month to month. When we look outside Edmonton, we can see that distance from Edmonton affects prices. Our region now includes the communities along Highway 28 in northeast Alberta, and we look forward to putting data from Cold Lake, Bonnyville, and St. Paul into our stat releases. This was a moderate year for sales of recreational and acreage properties. Acreages saw a price increase of 28% this year, And now that Albertans are prospering, many are out looking for that quiet country retreat. In recreational properties, buyers have been retrenching and waiting to see if their economic position is fully stable before venturing in to buy that second property. As our past president, Doug Singleton, pointed out last year, the lower destination cost of properties in warmer climates attracted a lot of Alberta investment. However, I think the local recreational and acreage properties remain attractive and will maintain their value in the long term, especially as the sun destination market recovers. On to commercial. The commercial division had a good year with a 25% increase in total dollar volume to $310 million. The total number of transactions increased 7% to 659. Commercial transactions processed through the MLS system are just a small portion of total MS sales and total commercial sales in the marketplace. We're aware that because of the nature of the transaction, many sales reported by Realtors are not listed or reported through our MLS system. In the year ahead, we see strength and growth of Edmonton contributing to stronger commercial sales, perhaps reaching $320 million in 2013. We're also aware that office with warehouse space is very tight and will continue through the next year. Once again, the growth of the city resulted in the strongest ever in multi-family market. There were 54 sales compared with 34 last year. With almost 51 million, that's a 77% growth. Of course, many multifamily sales are handled by non-MLS real estate agents working in commercial real estate brokerages, so this is not a true reflection of total market activity. The average price of a single-family home in the entire MLS region rose 2.6% in 2012. This is slightly higher than our 2% forecast. The price increases in new growth areas such as Cold Lake, Beaumont, and the communities outside the Henday will continue to drive the average price up, although that may not be reflected in an increase in any particular property. We anticipate that the price of a single-family home will be 2% higher in 2013. That's good news for sellers who expect to see a capital gain on their property, but it's also good news for buyers who can predict the market with a little more accuracy and time their purchase accordingly. As far as condo prices, condo properties sold through the MLS only increased by 1% this year, which is what Doug forecast for last year, and I believe that should have said last year. Only a small percentage of new condos are sold through the MLS, so our numbers do not reflect the higher prices being charged for new condos not in our system. New condos coming into the market will continue to exert downward pressure on the prices of resale condos. So once again, we are predicting a 1% increase in condo prices for 2013. As for sales numbers, we anticipate that an immigration, overall job stability, and high average wage and consumer confidence will contribute to increased housing sales in Edmonton and surrounding area. Unit sales of single-family homes, duplexes, and row houses will increase by 2% this year. But condo sales will be held back by the number of new condos coming on. So we see marginal growth in the number of condos that will be sold. In summary, the real estate market in Edmonton and area will remain stable and show steady but restrained growth in prices and sales numbers. Unless there are unforeseen external influences, there is no possibility or very little possibility of any cliffs, bounces, bubbles, or bursts in the economy. When you hear commentators making dire predictions about real estate, make sure they are talking about the Edmonton market and not being influenced by their view of Toronto or Vancouver. In conclusion, our business is influenced by market forces, governments, and the regulators. The stature of real estate in the community and the size of our financial transactions make us a highly visible target. Realtors understand that this is a complicated world, and it's impossible for our clients to keep up with all the changes. So it's our responsibility as professionals to be aware of the winds of change. Your association does its best to communicate changes to you and ensure that you are prepared. We trust that you will keep up to date with advances in the industry, and if you have any questions, I urge you to contact me or one of our current directors. As I said at the start of this presentation, Realtors, here when life happens. I can assure you that during my term as president, that your association is always here when life happens. Before we end the morning, I want to thank our sponsors and supporters of this event. We could not afford this event without the generous support of our partners, including the Edmonton Journal, Service Credit Union, EEDC, CMHC, and the Real Estate Weekly. We also appreciate the displays of Cutco Cutlery, Morris Real Estate, Rebar Camp, REIC, and the Realtors Community Foundation. Finally, I want to thank our 5 speakers, the Honorable Alison Redford, Angus Watt, Brad Ferguson, David Land, and John Rose. Please give them a round of applause. That's it. I made it. Please complete the evaluation forms that we have in front of you. We'd really like to know how we can make this event better for next year. And you can review all the videos on the intranet for the next month. So drive carefully and have yourselves a great day. Thanks.